Across the UK on DAB+.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham and the day is upon us. Let us get it together because there's loads to talk about this morning. There's lots of headlines this morning about migrants. Kemi Badenoch saying on the front page of the Daily Mail, I'll ban migrants who claim benefits from becoming UK citizens. Well, my first question is, I thought you couldn't claim benefits if you were a migrant, because every lefty I've ever had on this show in the history of shows has always said to me, oh no, they can't claim benefits if they're migrants. They're not allowed to work and they're not allowed to claim benefits. Well, that's apparently not true. Because here we are with benefits being banned from ever being paid to people who want to settle here. It's a bit too little too late, isn't it, really? I mean, the whole country is rammed to the gunnels with immigrants, whether they've come legally or illegally, whether they've overstayed their work visa, whether they've overstayed their student visa. And now suddenly the people who were in government for 14 years but are no longer in government want to clamp down on them. Brilliant. That's Britain for you today. We haven't forgotten, by the way, about the Keir Starmer revelations and the voice coach lesson that he had on Christmas Eve, which now turns out not to have been a voice coach lesson, but instead some kind of work get-together. Rachel Reeves was there as well. Was she getting a lesson? I wonder. It'd be nice if she was getting a lesson in economics, because that seems to be the kind of lesson that she needs to get. But we'll find out why the police, for some reason, have decided that they can't prosecute or even investigate the Prime Minister, because what happened was happening so long ago, more than 3 years ago, therefore beyond what is then the statute of limitations. Well, if that was the case, why didn't they say on Monday that they couldn't investigate it because it was too long ago? Instead of which they said, well, we can't investigate it because nobody's complained about it. It's all very strange. We'll be talking about that. Also, there's an asylum seeker who's won £100,000 from Her Majesty's or His Majesty's Exchequer because of the human rights problem. Labour have spent £11.6 million deporting a few migrants. Only 13,000, I'm afraid. You know, there's another couple of 100,000 to go. Prince Harry's back in the news about his drugs problems. We got the Chagos Islands deal being warned to be a very, very dangerous thing to do. Also, Donald Trump over in America still making an awful lot of common sense. He's come out and signed into an executive order the idea that there are only two genders, male and female, and therefore when the Olympics happens there won't be any strange athletic business going on. And if you're in a women's race, you have to be a woman. I don't think it's complicated, is it? 0344 499 1000. Charlie Rowley's here with us as well. We'll have a look through all the big stories in the papers. Very good morning to you, Charlie.
Good morning.
We are, of course, the home of common sense, so we want to hear from you. You can send us a voice note. 0344 499 1000 is the number. And, of course, you can send us a text to 87222. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Also, there's a story knocking around as well that Labour have spent so far, Charlie, I'll say a very good morning to you again, £2 million so far on flying around in private jets. Doesn't sound like the sort of very left-wing thing to do, really, does it?
Well, Ed Miliband might have something to say about it, but I imagine he's one of the ones that is flying around to all these...
Because it's all very, very well for them, isn't it? It's all one rule for them. You know, although, bizarrely, Keir Starmer apparently has turned down an invitation to go to an international summit in Paris next week, which is on AI. I don't know why he's not going, but it was put to me last night that, you know, do you remember those old sort of African republics back in the 70s where the leaders never left the country in case there was a coup, right? They didn't feel safe going abroad. So I wonder whether Keir Starmer doesn't want to leave Parliament and Westminster in case when he gets back somebody's changed the locks on Downing Street and removed him.
Yeah, well, not someone that's shy of going into an international conference or leaving the country.
Normally jumps at the chance. I mean, he's hardly been home for more than about 3 days in a row. You know?
Exactly, yes.
And suddenly, you know, even when he's at home, he's in trouble because he ends up getting involved in that business with the voice coach. What a weird story that's been this week, you know? I mean, I don't know what you think of it, but the idea that the police, first of all, say, well, we're not investigating it because nobody's asked us to, basically. And then 2 days later, they said, well, we're not investigating it now because it happened too long ago. And it's beyond the statute of limitations, which nobody knew existed.
Yeah, I mean, why they didn't see it coming, even if they said, look, you know, we can't investigate because nobody's complained. Right. Well, hello? I mean, lots of people would then complain.
Loads of people then complained. But this is my thing. This is why it looks bad, because it looks as though it's a stitch-up. It looks as though Keir Starmer and his legal advisors have gone, well, you know, just say nobody's complained, because they haven't. And then when somebody complains, they go, oh, right, well, don't just say it's too long ago. I mean, there's loads of people. I was on Jeremy Carl's show yesterday when the story broke. And there's loads of people who have still paid out fines for things that happened during COVID, who are still waiting for their fines to be repaid because they were supposed to be getting the money back. There's people in Northern Ireland being prosecuted for crimes that happened during the Troubles 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I mean, this idea that only during COVID suddenly there's no, you can't prosecute people through more than 3 years after it happened. Where's that come from?
Exactly, and it's just the rank hypocrisy of it, because people will think about that time and think, who were the key workers?
Yeah.
Well, a voice coach travelling through different tiers across the country to go and deliver some sort of voice training is not a key worker. That's been even accepted, I think, by Labour.
The government have accepted that, and the government have now said that it wasn't actually a voice coach lesson, it was a work event. Well, because Rachel Reeves, it turns out, was there as well. I mean, what a party that would be. Can you imagine Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in the same room and with a glass of eggnog? I mean, who could ignore that invitation?
Oh, Christmas Eve. Exactly. And I think if it was for voice coaching, I mean, I hope they kept the receipt, because neither of them seemed to have
This was a question that we were going to put to Downing Street yesterday about, well, is there a receipt for the voice note lesson? And if there is, voice coach lesson, rather, and if there is, can we see it, please? Because I bet there isn't one.
Probably not, no.
They'll be getting out the John Bull printing kit to kind of try and produce one, and make it look as if it actually was 3 years old, and put it in that old trick you used to do, to put it in a pot with some tea bags and then come out, looks like a pirate map, and you can go, look, it's really old, it's 3 years old. I just think there's a stink about it, a stench about it, and people will say, well, it's not that important. And maybe on the scheme of things it's not, but people are pretty angry about it.
Well, it's also just the way in which it's been sort of discussed. And so, Keir Starmer tried to say that, look, I needed this because I was dealing at pace with things that the government was saying about COVID, and I needed to get the facts quickly and then present it and make... Well, but you've prided your whole political career on being the former director of public prosecutions, a barrister, by the way, that has to turn up and answer very quickly.
Does everything by the book.
Does everything by the book, but also presenting facts and presenting an argument very quickly in a quick turnaround. You've never had a voice coach necessarily before, and I know it's quite niche, but I do. The real victims of COVID, as well as obviously those that obviously lost their lives and families of the bereaved, but many kids that had to lose out on social life, social skills, that their classrooms are locked down. They were shut out of the education system, shut out of socialisation. Yeah. I know it's quite niche, but there'll be hundreds of probably thousands of actually students that are studying things like drama, and who all had to have voice coaching lessons online. Yeah. And they'll be looking at the Prime Minister thinking, well, hang about, how is it that you get one-to-one tuition when we all had to suffer through Zoom and through,
Well, we had people calling in yesterday to say that some children that they're aware of, or children of theirs, who have, speech problems and have speech therapists, they couldn't see speech therapists face-to-face. And again, it creates, as I say, this two-tier system. I'm sorry to say this, Keir, but, it's a two-tier voice coaching system now as well.
And this is I think this is what really bugs me, is that there is the lack of real opposition debates, penetrating the point, basically. So, Keir Starmer has flipped and flopped all over the place by saying, oh, I needed it because I was presenting. That's got nothing to do with a voice coach visiting you on that day, at that time, when everybody else was locked out. It's got nothing to do with you presenting an argument. No. You can do that perfectly well. You've got the voice, you can speak.
Stretching the bounds of probability, isn't it? And people, as ordinary people, and people listening to this show, watching the show this morning, will say, what a load of...
Yeah, exactly. They won't buy it. They won't buy it.
They just don't. I mean, according to the cops, here's the statement from the cops. We can confirm we have received a report. The specific legislation that would be used by police forces dealing with alleged offences during COVID has a 3-year deadline for initiating proceedings. As this alleged incident falls outside of this time frame, no action will be taken. Well, very nice. Isn't that great? Meanwhile, Ms Mellinger, the woman in question, it turned out yesterday, was once married to Robin Asquith. Now, you're probably far too young to remember who that is, but he starred in a series of soft porn films, including titles like Confessions of a Window Cleaner. So it's got this other sort of aspect to it now, this story, which is sort of comedy,
very soft,
comedy camp stuff, just very ridiculous, It's one of these kind of, it's a Benny Hill style kind of soft porn where people's trousers keep falling down, that kind of thing. I mean, it's pretty bad. But let's listen to Tory MP. Finally, one Tory MP actually asked a question at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday. This is Gagan Mohindra. Have a look.
I know that, like everyone in the House, the Prime Minister is an honourable member. On that basis, can you repeat his assurances that all rules were followed while the country was in Tier 4 lockdown in December 2020, not just by him, but as his team as well, but also his voice coach, Leona Mellinger.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, in December 2020, I was in my office working on the expected Brexit deal. With my team, we had to analyse the deal as it came in at speed, prepare and deliver a live statement at speed on one of the most important issues for our country in recent years. That's what I was doing. What were they doing? Suitcases of booze into Downing Street, partying and fighting, vomiting up the walls, leaving the cleaners to remove red wine stains. That's the difference. I was working, they were partying.
Well, OK then. It doesn't explain the voice coach, does it? Why does he need the voice coach? And so now he was working. So when it first came out, the Labour government, I believe, said this was a private voice coaching lesson that he was getting. But now that's not what it is. It's something else. It was, you know, him working on the Brexit response.
Yes, yeah, and it didn't.
You can't just keep lying to people. When's he going to get that?
And that's when I think, you know, the public, as I say, the public don't buy it, and they will, you know, if it seems bad, if it smells bad, it usually is bad. And I think the public will see that this is a guy who, the reason why it's so frustrating for the public is because he spent his whole time as the opposition leader of the opposition, attacking Boris Johnson for every small thing, you know, holding him to account and priding himself on being someone that's whiter than white, cleaner than clean. And clearly he's been someone that's taken donations, taken suits, glasses, God knows what,
stuff for his wife,
boxes at Arsenal,
apartments for Taylor Swift tickets twice.
Taylor Swift tickets, you know, and now a voice coach that, you know, clearly doesn't seem
and he doesn't seem to think that any of this stuff applies to him. That's the bit that people don't like as well. It's supremely arrogant of him to walk around as if to say, how dare you question what I'm doing? I'm doing this for the good of the country, don't you know? And if I need a voice coach, I'm going to damn well have one. Yeah, that's how he's coming across.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, as we said before, you know, not being in the country very often, going to any other you know, international summit, just because he wants to play the role of Prime Minister, which is absolutely fine. You need to be on the international stage, but you've got to recognise that, you know, you're governing the UK, and there are lots of problems here. There are lots more problems of your own making now through that budget.
We'll move on to those because there's an awful lot of stuff in the papers this morning about the terrible mess of the Nottingham killer, the terrible mess of the Southport killer. We'll come back to that in a moment. But let's talk about something else, as we said earlier, about private jet flights. This is Rachel Reeves, the now Chancellor, and this is what she had to say about private flights from 2023.
We will crack down on Tory ministers' private jet habit. What is Rishi Sunak so scared of up there in his private jet? Meeting a voter? Well, we will properly enforce the ministerial code on the use of private planes and save millions of pounds for taxpayers in the process.
That doesn't seem to be working out too well. Amongst many of her other failed economic promises, she's actually cost us £2 million as opposed to saving us any money at all. And if she's so keen on the ministerial code on private jets, I wonder what the ministerial code on private jets actually is. Because, you know, according to David Lammy, I think, is number one in the hit parade on the private jet front, and then followed closely by the Prime Minister. £2 million. It's an awful lot of money. I know that people will say they can't go on commercial jets and all of that, but surely to God they don't have to spend so much money. It's a luxury lifestyle thing, isn't it? It's not a security thing necessarily. Yeah,
exactly so. And I remember sort of, I don't think there's anything necessarily specific, just thinking off the top of my head now, that I recall. I mean, I think there is a guidance that says that you must take the most effective, you know, the quickest and safest form of travel. So that can mean actually, you know, getting the train to 2 hours from London to Manchester.
Which politicians do, and which prime ministers have done, because you can secure a train.
Exactly. But if you take a private jet from, you know, the London City, for example, up to Manchester, people will question, well, hold on, you've only probably saved an hour, but by the time you've got through the airport, it's cost more than actually you can do another hour's work on the train.
But again, it's just, it shows the hypocrisy of the Labour government. Also, the other point she made there is he frightened of meeting a voter up in his private jet. You know, the Labour government are not meeting very many voters. You know, whenever you see them out and about, they're not allowed to go anywhere. Nobody's allowed to go anywhere near them. You know, I think when Steve Reed went up to some farmers' convention, you know, he was rushed in and out of the thing. He wouldn't speak to anybody. Keir Starmer famously went to the scene of the Southport killings, didn't talk to anybody. You know, Rachel Reeves hasn't been seen for months, you know, out on the public streets of this country. You know, they're supposed to represent the people. They don't want to talk to them.
Yeah, and I think exactly so, because there's, I think within Labour circles they understand that the decision that they've made earlier on in this government have not been the right ones. Not that they've just been unpopular, but they have just been fundamentally wrong, and they're scared.
There's nothing that they've done which anybody's happy about, really, in any way, shape or form. How about this from Andy in the Wirral? He says, we were told we needed to report people and our neighbours that were breaking the rules. So the people who wrote the book have now hidden it from the police as well. They're all just as bad as each other. Yeah, I mean, if they've now accepted that she was not a key worker, and if they've now accepted that she shouldn't have been there, then I don't understand how it is that everybody who was there didn't report it at the time, as they were supposed to. Shouldn't they have reported it to the police?
They probably should have done, yes, yeah.
And yet they didn't.
And they didn't. And it's just another thing that, as I say, it's never one thing that sort of undoes you. It's a series of things that obviously just add up. I mean, even with Boris, COVID and the Partygate wasn't the actual thing that it was. Ultimately, it was then the Chris Pincher affair that sort of wasn't handled particularly well.
But it was just one thing after another.
It was one thing after another.
And it's a body of work, isn't it, if you like?
Exactly. And this is now adding up for the Prime Minister, it seems. One thing after another, where the public aren't happy, his backbenchers are getting a little bit jittery. They've obviously got the threats of just their own downfall and bad decision-making, but then obviously the threat of reform that now seems to be ahead in a number of polls.
They seem to be very worried about reform. We'll come back to that. And coming up, we'll talk about, as well, a couple of the front pages this morning, Express and the Mirror. Failed by the state. Families of 3 Nottingham victims tell us who let us down, and the Southport killer was dropped from the Prevent watch list too early. Once again, 2 massive failures by the state, who are supposed to look after the welfare of the people of this country, and these are 6 innocent people, 3 of them, under the age of 10, murdered in cold blood by some people that should never have been out on the streets walking around because they were so bleeding dangerous. We'll talk about that coming up next. Charlie Rowley's here. It's 90 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 22 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. This is, of course, the home of common sense. It's the one place to be if you want to find out, one, what's going on, but two, what's really going on, because you won't hear about it on any other of the media outlets that you might look for. Because if you looked around yesterday, as I did, at various different types of news that you could find, you might have thought that there was never, ever a problem with Keir Starmer and never, ever a problem with the voice coach scenario. Absolutely incredible. Let's get a quick voice note to kick things off.
Good morning, Mike. I'm absolutely furious this morning. I thought, brilliant, we've got him now. Come on, Starmer, you've got to go now. But no, once again, he escapes it. How many more times? Does he think we're absolutely stupid? And that stupid robotic voice thing he's got. Cheers, Mike. Have a great day. Keep up the fight.
James, thank you very much indeed. I mean, people are really annoyed about this, and I mean, we've been getting an awful lot of people doing impersonations of Starmer because he is a ludicrous figure now. Because the one person that you would not really believe that he's ever had in the same room as him would be a voice coach, because he sounds so awful. I mean, his voice is about as bad as you can get, isn't it? I mean, even when he was there in Parliament saying, you know, we were working, what were you doing? I mean, you know, I don't know where he gets it from.
Well, and knowing that Rachel Reeves was apparently in that room too.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
what she was doing, just taking notes, I should imagine.
Presumably, yeah.
Not speaking at all.
Maybe she had, you know, those old-fashioned calculators where you go like that, and just adding up how much money they had to see. How about this? Mandy from Guildford. Why does a litigation lawyer need a voice coach? Purely by his profession. Litigation is talking and sounding like you know what you're talking about. Well, this is why I take issue with people who say, but he was this very well-experienced lawyer. I don't think he was. I don't know that he was a particularly great advocate in a courtroom. I've never seen or heard any stories about that. I don't know whether he did a lot of that or not. An awful lot of lawyering is done sitting behind a desk, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think that message sums it up entirely. That, you know, as a lawyer, though, whether it's in a courtroom or certainly behind closed doors, you're going to have to present arguments, and certainly would have had to turn up to committee meetings in the House of Commons as the Director of Public Prosecution. Right. So he would have done a lot of when we're outside. So he didn't. You know, the idea if he needed a voice coach should have happened long ago.
Again, there's more kind of questions and answers, because one of the things that was said was that he suffered from stage fright, and that was why he needed a voice coach. Again, well, does he suffer from stage fright or not? You know, he just makes these statements and things are said, and then they're all forgotten about. You know?
And why wouldn't you do that? I mean, look, you could understand if it sort of happened when he just became in the shadow cabinet. So when you think you're going to take on more public-facing responsibilities and speeches, I might need to sort out my nasal tone, or I might need to sort out whatever my speech impediment, whatever it is. But you know, he'd been shadow Brexit secretary for some years under the Corbyn administration, who he supported, obviously, and then he became leader of the opposition. He'd been in post for about I think 2 or 3 years off the top of my head, even before COVID struck. So it's not as if he's not had time to get this fixed.
Absolutely right. I mean, the bottom line is that he is obviously good friends with this woman. It turns out that her husband has given him money in the past for legal services. People have asked questions about what they were as well. She was very, very pro-Labour and anti-Boris Johnson. Apparently lots of tweets were found by her sending things out, more or less parroting what Keir Starmer said. So they're friends. Just admit it, you know. I mean, particularly since he was so sure that it was 3 years ago and nothing would be a problem. Why didn't you just tell the truth?
Yes.
Because he couldn't have been prosecuted.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another question for you, you know. How about this from Verd in Southampton? Why is a man from Surrey getting voice coaching from a lady from East Germany? No wonder he sounds like a robot. I'm not sure that she is from East Germany, but if she is, I'm getting nods. Yes, she apparently is from East Germany. There's another clue. He must have met her at the work camp in Czechoslovakia. Maybe that's where they oh, God, I don't know. Let's talk a bit about Prevent, because failed by the state is what it says on the front page of the Daily Mirror and the front page of the Daily Express as well. The Sun have got a spread inside. I mean, this is a story that was so horrific, the Southport killing up there in the northwest of England. Southport killer. I don't like to mention his name, and I don't like to use his picture, so I'm not going to. He should have always been treated as a potential terrorist, says this damning report which has come out. So Home Office review laid bare a litany of errors and missed opportunities to stop him murdering 3 young girls in last summer's knife rampage. Unbelievably, he was referred to Prevent 3 separate times, but they're now saying that it might not have been noted that it was the 3rd time because they'd spelt his name wrong in other entries of when people had complained about him, so that they might not have been aware that it was his 3rd referral. And you're kind of going, what sort of people are running these organisations, you know?
And the previous excuse was that he was Googling some of the atrocities that had happened across the world because he took an interest in global affairs.
Yes.
Rather than
it's like they're looking for a reason not to call him a terrorist, you know?
Exactly.
And that is the problem. And the other problem, and I will say this without fear or favour, we had a guy called Lord Carlisle on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he was supposed to be the person who was overseeing Prevent at one point, and sort of making sure that it was doing its job. And he was absolutely convinced, the last time I spoke to him, that they were doing a great job. So let's have a look at what he had to say.
You have to remember that Prevent is a scheme that depends on cooperation. And I find it very difficult to believe that this perpetrator would have cooperated with Prevent. That may be the reason why he was not admitted to the Prevent programme, which is very successful with many people, but not all.
Well, I would have to say that I would disagree with you on that as well, because Prevent is clearly not fit for purpose. Would you not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all.
What exactly has been good that Prevent has done?
Prevent has done what it says in the on the tin.
Well, it hasn't prevented anything, has it? It hasn't prevented young children being killed. No, it hasn't prevented young children from being killed. It hasn't prevented the London Bridge attacker from killing people when he came to Fisherman's Hall. You know, it has failed multiple times to protect the British public. So therefore, the word Prevent is not even a suitable moniker for the organisation.
Can I now answer your question?
Please do.
Or whichever question you want me to answer.
Well, you tell me what successes Prevent has provided us with.
I was about to, but you interrupted me during my first
I'm sorry,
sentence.
you're obviously not used to robust conversations, are you? Well, yeah, because I'm not going to be spoken down to like some kind of child, OK? I don't know who you think you are. Just because you're a lord does not give you the ability to lord it over the rest of the public, OK? So talk to me as an equal, or else you can get lost, frankly.
I thought you were a journalist.
No, I am a journalist. Yes, I am.
I'm going to answer your question if you'll shut up for a minute.
Go ahead.
Right. Prevent has done a great deal of good. Prevent has prevented large numbers of people from becoming terrorists, but it does not succeed in every case, and you could not expect it to succeed in every case.
Yeah, unfortunately for my Lord Carlisle, the Home Office would beg to differ, because the Home Office review has suggested that they have not in any way, shape or form done their job. In fact, they have had missed opportunities, multiple missed opportunities, and a multitude of litany of errors, which could have prevented the deaths. And this is why I know that the people who are involved in running this country, like Lord Carlisle, are a disgrace, because there are 6 innocent victims of these failings, and yet he likes to sit there and say, oh, well, you know, they do OK most of the time. You know, 1 or 2 people slip through a net. Well, I'm sorry, it's not good enough, is it?
Absolutely right. And can I just say that attitude that that Lord Carlisle
that's what's wrong with it.
And that is systemic throughout the civil service.
Yeah.
So you will have people exactly like that in the Home Office that are dealing with the small boats crisis, that are talking to the Home Secretary day in, day out to say, we can't do this, or, you know, we can only do so much, or, you know, it is the typical, and I apologise in advance to anyone called Karen, but there is a, you know, theme out there, you know, it is just somebody being a Karen, described as someone who just does what they think that they should do. They stick in their own lane, they don't go above and beyond, they don't do... You know, if you've been referred to Prevent 3 times, this is not an excuse to say we don't get it right every time.
No.
He was reported 3 times. You have failed.
Yes.
The Prevent programme has systematically failed.
The thing that did work up until the moment he was referred to Prevent was the fact that he was referred to Prevent. That's what's supposed to then, call me old-fashioned, prevent him from actually doing any harm to anyone. But that's precisely what they didn't do.
Exactly.
You know, so all the bits leading up to it, you know, so the reporting of this ghastly individual, you know, from the schools that he went to, the reporting from the police that had dealings with him, you know, yes, you could say there was multiple failings, but once it gets to the point where he's at Prevent, then that's where it's supposed to be fixed. And that's where it wasn't fixed.
Exactly. And trying to suggest that, you know, we just got it wrong, and they you know, or they don't get it right every time. Well, they got it fundamentally wrong, putting it politely.
Yeah, catastrophically wrong.
You know, and what is so sad is that obviously it could have been prevented.
Yeah.
But you have people that obviously clearly, like that interview displayed, people unable to accept it or to say, well, that's just part of, you know, that is why I know we give politicians a rough ride, absolutely as we should. I mean, they should be be held to account and scrutinised no end, because they are ultimately responsible for their departments and everything that sits below it. But there is another layer of people that might be running the Prevent programme, or might be overseeing the small boats crisis, or might be just now chief executives of local councils that mismanage funds. These people should not be hiding in the background. They need to take responsibility, and they constantly fail to do so.
It's more important to sort of protect the thing that they are supposedly overseeing, rather than to admit that it got it wrong and to try and fix it properly.
And that's why, that is why people want a completely new way of politics. That is why when you hear Nigel Farage speak, and you see what's happening in America, and this is completely tearing up the system, because people, real people out there, see this time and time again and think this is exactly why we need people to come in, and we need to shine a light under the bonnet of whatever's going wrong in our public services from top to bottom, and that's why we need a change of politics.
Absolutely. We're going to have a look at some of the Donald Trump stuff from yesterday in a moment. Charlie Rowley's here. We've got lots of other stories to do. We've got some great questions coming in, and some great texts as well. Graham from Bushy says, maybe Robin Asquith will make a comeback and star in a new film called Confessions of a Voice Coach. Well, you never know. Here's Liam with the message.
Morning, Mike. Liam from Kent. I've had enough of this. I think I'm going to speak for most people and say, why do I bother getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going out to work 12 to 16-hour days just for these bunch of clowns to make the rules up as and when they please? Just honestly, Mike, we need you as the Prime Minister, mate. I've had enough of all of this. I've had enough of the lot of them, and I am getting sick and tired of it. All the best, though, Mike. Thank you very much.
Liam, nice note. Thank you very much indeed. People are getting sick to death of being pushed around, told what to do, taxed up the wazoo, told to be grateful for where it is that they're doing, because they're doing it all for us. Well, we don't want them to do anything for us anymore. We just want them to get out, thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't we?
Yep, and people just want government. They want light government, but they want what government does do. They just want it to do it okay. They don't even want it to do it well. They just want it to do what it says it's going to do. And where there's a problem, just fix it.
Make our lives easier. Do not reward people who come to this country illegally with, new coats, puffer jackets, pizzas, hotel rooms, shoes, people who have come here to this country, we kept being told, oh, they don't get benefits. Well, apparently they do, because Kemi Badenoch wants to stop them having them. So, we know there's a problem, and we know there's a problem at the heart of this democracy of ours, but who's going to fix it? Who knows? If only we had a Donald Trump. We'll come on to that in a moment. Coming up after the break, we'll get Trump's plans to ban trans athletes from the Olympics. This is Talk. Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. It's 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory, of course. Charlie Rowley's here with us. We're going to talk about the United States of America right now. Joseph Combe is here, Director of Public Policy from the Family Policy Alliance in Virginia. I was watching a press conference yesterday in Washington, D.C. in the White House press room with Caroline Leavitt, who's the new White House press secretary. What an incredibly impressive young woman she is. I don't even want to call her a young woman. She's 27, but she's absolutely on it. And every single question that was fired at her, she answered. I thought to myself, imagine if we had that kind of clarity and that kind of transparency in this country, where all you get is, oh, we're not going to be answering that question today, or that's not really part of our remit. No, we can't tell you that. But yesterday, basically, Donald Trump signed an executive order banning men from female sports. Let's have a look.
You want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay? Are you ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. I want to make this a really good signature, because this is, this is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
Pretty good, huh? I see that. Okay? Good. Now you're going to go out and win those events, right? Nice to see you all. Nice to see you. Great going, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you, kids. Here. Take a pen. I'll give some of these out, okay? Take a pen. Take a pen.
I mean, you've got to say, there's something very, very endearing about Donald Trump, and I know that there will be people that don't have his views, but let's talk to Joseph Combe. His organisation has been campaigning to save girls' sports from being destroyed by trans competition. Joseph, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike. It's good to be on here with you.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. I mean, quite a big day, really, considering where we've been for the last 4 years and what Joe Biden has been doing in the White House. I'm not sure anybody can find out what he's been doing, but not very much of anything. But this is a big deal, isn't it, for the Olympics, aside from anything else?
It really is. It's a historic day, not just for American girls and women in sports, but really for the whole world, I think, is going to feel the impact of this for the better for girls' sports, because the executive order's text specifically talks about directing Secretary of State Marco Rubio to try to influence the International Olympic Committee to adopt more fair standards for women's sports. So I think there's going to be some really good ramifications from this around the world. Like, it's really an historic day.
And what would it mean for the girls of American schools, going to school? I don't know what it's like in the US these days in terms of whether there's a lot of trans athletes trying to get into girls' teams. It happens not so much here, but it does happen. And a lot of people worry that it's quite dangerous.
Yeah, it happens everywhere. And I think what girls can feel encouraged by now is they can feel validated, and they can know they can have an expectation of 4 things, 4 key words that the president mentions in the executive order, which are safety, fairness, dignity, and truth. 4 things that we've been struggling for in America for a few years, but we finally have now. And the presidency of the United States is the most powerful executive office or power holder in the history of the world. And that office now recognizes the need for those 4 things: fairness, safety, dignity, and truth, all of which have been deprived not just from female athletes for the past few years, but from all of Americans. When we deny fact and science and biology, we're being denied truth, which I think we're entitled to from our governing leaders. And that's what we got today in a new dose from President Trump.
And will there be much pushback, do you think? Are you expecting any organisations to say, hang on a minute, we're going to challenge this in the courts?
No, absolutely. I mean, Family Policy Alliance works on a portfolio of what we call pro-family issues, and they do include ensuring that girls' sports are just for girls. And when we get laws or help get laws passed throughout the 50 United States, we pretty much expect that all those laws will be litigated somehow. The ACLU or some group that disagrees with us will find a sympathetic plaintiff and try to bring a lawsuit against them. So I think they're already lining that up. They'll probably have the court documents filed tomorrow. But that's what we bargained for, and I think the president definitely has both. He obviously has science and fact on his side, but I think he has the law too. This executive order refers very explicitly to Title IX, which is the title of the United States civil rights laws that requires equal opportunity and fairness for women in college. It includes in sports. And the Biden administration tried to rewrite that to include, to mean that men and women included gender identity, meaning men and women who think they're the opposite sex. Right. And Title IX was written in the 60s. So obviously the framers of that didn't mean for it to mean gender identity, but the Biden administration tried to misinterpret a Supreme Court ruling. And this executive order from President Trump very explicitly repeals that and reestablishes the founding principles of Title IX, which is that women deserve to have fairness and equal opportunity in sports. So because of this litigation, Mike, I like to tell people this is a huge historic victory today, but the fight is not over by a long shot. Today was the beaches of Normandy. Berlin is a long ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely right. We wish you the best of luck with it, Joseph. Thank you very much indeed. Joseph Combe there from the Public Policy Unit, the Family Policy Alliance in Virginia. I think, and it's not really just a party political issue, this. It's also about, there's an awful lot of people I know who vote Democrat in America who just say, look, particularly women, who say, there's something wrong with a government that wants to sort of push male athletes into female sports, and there's no. I think the fact that he says this is a historic day, I think it is for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think he's absolutely right to say that it transcends across from the US into the UK and across the world, because we've had some brilliant campaigners like Sharon Davis, I know who's been on this channel multiple times, to say, look, it's not about being mean or rude, or people should live their lives freely, but when it comes to sport and equality, you're trashing women's rights over and above just a few select people that are clearly biologically going to be more able and athletic over
almost
women.
All trans athletes who have gone into women's sports have done so with a great deal of success, and you have to start asking the question, are you doing it in order to be successful and make more money? Because in many cases that's exactly what they're doing, because they were very average, let's say, male athletes, and then suddenly they go into a women's sphere. And in some sports as well, it's really dangerous. Boxing, for example, and we saw the controversy over the boxing in the Olympics. Rugby, football, any contact sport, you're up against somebody who's twice the size of you. It's quite intimidating, apart from anything else.
Yeah, and there's obviously a psychology there, because you sort of say to yourself, well, look, you can still be in sport even if you can't be an athlete. If you are not successful in a particular gender, you can't just suddenly sort of, of course you want to be successful. Athletes all want to be successful. And if you just crave success and achievement, and it leads you to, trying to change gender because of what other maybe sort of mental health that's going on and other things that are going on in your life, but that's not a journey that you should take. And by the way, it is just biology that in sport, just as it does in health, trumps everything else.
I mean, even if you to take the view that somebody can decide in their own mind that they want to change their gender, you don't normally expect them to go, and then I want to go and play football. You kind of go, what, for a woman's team? Really? Is that really your motivation, But talking of treating people fairly, how about this, right? Pakistani asylum seeker wins £100,000 after being treated like a criminal for overstaying her visa. Well, surely overstaying your visa is actually being a criminal, isn't it? Because it's a crime to overstay your visa, is it not?
Well, and it goes back to exactly as you said about the White House press conference, when she was asked, how many illegal do you think you will be? Well,
they're all illegal.
All of them, because they've entered the country illegally.
Yeah. Well, this was her yesterday. I mean, she just went, there are two genders, male and female. Next.
Yes.
It's brilliant how she does it. But this is a story about somebody called Nadra Almas, who initially came to Britain on a student visa and fought a 16-year battle, right? Just get that, 16-year battle, longer than we've been on air, ladies and gentlemen, for a right to remain, arguing that as a Christian, she would face persecution if she was forced to return home. In 2018, she was handcuffed and detained by Home Office officials who told her she would be deported, but then they released her 2 weeks later. So this story has gone on and on and on. Typical kind of British hopelessness, where they haven't made a decision, or if they have made a decision, it hasn't been followed through. She's been meanwhile living here, and she's now been awarded £100,000 for outrageous treatment against her because of her human rights being inflicted. I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, and there would be, I remember sort of being governor, whenever you got advice from a lawyer, that didn't sort of add up, or you didn't think was right, we'd just get a another lawyer.
Yeah.
You know, there are plenty of opinions out there in terms of the legal profession.
Yes.
But just, you're absolutely right. The way in which our system is unable, it seems, to make a decision or to commit to something and just do what it says it's going to do. So if there's any kind of failure, whether it's in the law, whether it's in terms of migration, if you need to be deported, if you need to you have your visa cut short, whatever it is, or you've outstayed your... You know, if you've broken the law, you've broken the law.
Right.
There's no two ways about it. You can't have people like Lord... what's his
Carlisle.
Carlisle mentality sort of saying...
the Home Office largely works well.
Yes.
But unfortunately, there's a few 100 million people that seem to have come into the country since the migration laws were changed. The court heard that she was born in Pakistan, came to the UK on a student visa in 2004. For 5 months was the visa, right? 5 months. It's now, what, 2025? 21 years later, she's still here.
Yes, yeah.
And I mean, just ridiculous.
Exactly. And, you know, religious grounds and, you know, claiming because you might be persecuted because of, you know, gender or sexuality or you know, people will be, of course, claiming anything under the sun just to say here or not be deported when, you know, we just need to have a robust system and a system that actually works. You know, if you've outstayed your visa, if you're not supposed to be in this country, then you're not going to stay. It's as simple as that.
But instead of which, they'll find some human rights lawyer who will go, oh, here's how we apply for asylum over here, and then you can, by the time this has gone through, it will be about 3 years from now. And meanwhile, presumably, she'll be one of those people that's living on benefits. Because, you know, these are the kind of people that Kemi Badenoch wants to deport and say you can never be a UK citizen.
Yes, well, with that payout, she shouldn't be on benefits, I suppose.
Well, I wonder if it might affect her, you know, a universal credit scenario. We might save a bit of money there, who can say. But 6:49, Charlie Rowley's here. Coming up, we're going to talk to you about Chinese cars and why, if you've got one, you shouldn't have any conversations in them. This is Talk.
full-length runway in Britain was built in the 1940s. No progress in 80 years. A third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43% by 2050.
Could a new runway be built that abides with carbon targets, concerns around noise pollution and concerns around air pollution?
That a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports and make the UK more open and more connected.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:52 here with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. It is Thursday, the weekend is approaching. Charlie Rowley's here. I've got some great news for you, Charlie. We've got a Meghan Markle video to show you, which we haven't seen one for a while. Voice note first, though, from Pete on Trump.
Morning, Mike. Pete from Bath here. We should all be hailing Donald Trump today for signing that executive order that basically states what everybody else knows apart from our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, that there are only two sexes, and to allow only females to be in female sports. Great show as always, Mike. Have a great day.
Pete, thanks very much indeed. Absolutely right. Sonia says this morning, Mike, I get to watch all of your show, the only upside of flu. I'm sorry to hear you're not well. But anyway, listen, you'll feel a lot better after you've been watching this for 4 hours, I tell you. Let's have a look. Meghan Markle, you might remember, just, 2 weeks or so ago when the fires were at their peak in California and Los Angeles, she and Harry decided to take it upon themselves to do the great heroic act of, standing in front of some cameras and hugging some people to help them with their trauma. She's now been accused of even worse than that, because she's put out a video yesterday on Instagram where she's basically praising herself for helping out a 15-year-old girl. Let's have a look.
Just told that something arrived that I have been waiting for. Oh my god. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, when my husband and I were in Altadena, we went to a community where all the homes were left in ashes. This mom had found a couple things, and as I was talking to her, I turned and looked and I saw this young woman, and I said, oh my gosh, how old are you? She's 15. She lives there. And her mom shared something with me and said that when they came back to see their house for the first time, which is as we were meeting them, that all that she'd been looking for in her home was the t-shirt from the Billie Eilish concert that she had just gone to, that she left in the washing machine or the dryer. And of course, they now see their home and the washing machine and the dryer are ash. They're not there anymore. And so I said, well, I don't know Billie Eilish, but I'm going to figure out how to get you this shirt. So I thought of everybody that I knew, and I made a voice note, and I was like, please, can someone get this voice note to Billie Eilish? Here's what I'm asking. You guys, I don't even know what all of this stuff means, but it's signed for her.
I mean, what's wrong with her? I'm sorry. That's just not normal behaviour, is it? If you want to do something nice for somebody and you're a celebrity, just do something nice for them. Why do you have to make a video about it? And why do you have to kind of, lionise yourself as if you've done this incredible act of amazingness?
I think if it wasn't already clear to people that this is someone who is basically, I might as well say, a narcissist.
I think narcissist is pretty much bang on.
I think it's bang because, even the most abhorrent, repulsive celebrity out there that you dislike will do lots of charitable things, but they'll do it on the quiet.
Yeah.
Because they'll just do it because they want to do a good thing and they don't want to make a song and dance about it. It's just who they are, even if their persona isn't acceptable to the public. But she goes out of her way to make it all about her.
Exactly. Well, Billie Eilish, who's apparently given the shirt, hasn't mentioned it at all.
No.
So she's not put out an Instagram post to say, oh, I've sent this shirt off to Meghan Markle.
Because, totally, and rightly so, because you don't want to make a crisis, clearly a horrible, horrible crisis, where people can't even go to their homes. It is, of course, a very nice thing to do, but you just do it.
Yeah, but you don't get the sense that
about
she's done it as a result of wanting to do something for somebody else. She's done it because it means that she can make an Instagram post about, look at me, look what I've done. Aren't I amazing?
Yes, yeah. And then, of course, there'll be probably another Netflix episode where we're all criticising her for that video and how terrible that is, and another £1 million.
So far that's still on hold, as we understand it. Love Meghan. It didn't come out, did it? I mean, there's some suggestion that it might not have been her decision because it wasn't anything to do with the fire. Because they could put it out now, but it still hasn't been yet released.
Right.
So you do worry that it might not be that good. Love Meghan. I mean, she'll probably make an entire episode about the Billie Eilish thing. Let's get a voice note from Gus.
Morning, Mike. Great show. Gus from Pontefract. Never mind Keir Starmer needing a voice coach. What about Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves? Rachel, have you got an up-to-date CV? No, Keir. I mean Zippy. I mean Keir. Why? No reason. Angela, that's a nice dress. Where did you get it? Oh, I don't know. It was for note. Somebody bought it me. It's green. Do you like it? Do you like my new dress? It was for naught. What did you do Christmas Eve? An elocution lesson. Oh.
Brilliant. That is good. That is very good, Gus. Thank you very much indeed. Angela Rayner, of course, is in a bit of trouble this morning, isn't she? Because she wants to destroy Grenfell Tower. She doesn't seem to have asked anybody first.
Well, that was, I think, a live...
You know a bit about this story, don't you?
I do. Well, I think that was a live recording from the cabinet. from cabinet. But yes, it's a strange one. Grenfell Tower. I mean, obviously, the biggest disaster, I think, in terms of the UK, it's life lost within a construction site since, I think, World War II. But, you know, 72 people obviously tragically lost their life. The community are completely divided. I mean, obviously, when yes, so you're right, I was in that department as a special advisor. They're divided because, obviously, the tower still remaining is a daily reminder of the disaster where half of the community
They had the same conversations, didn't they, about Ground Zero in America, about what they should do with it, whether they should build another tower and all of that. It takes a long time to figure it out. And I think inevitably everybody's of the understanding that the tower will have to come down because it can't remain structurally unsupported. It's been supported enough as it is. So at some point it's got to come down. Half the other community obviously don't want people just to forget about the disaster and forget about the treatment of those residents. So in some sense, everybody understands at some point it's got to have to come down. But if you're going to decide that it's going to come down, at least consult and tell the bereaved and the family. That's probably not a bad thing to do. As opposed to issue a press release. Yes. You know, headline news that it's coming down. So she's... We're almost out of time, but I think we've got about 20 seconds to do the For Your Ears Only. Great story in The Sun, page 11. Defence chiefs have been ordered to stop talking in electric cars over fears that their Chinese makers might be eavesdropping. Well... So if you're in an Uber and it's a Chinese-made car, keep your mouth shut, is what I would say. Exactly. And these are our defence vehicles. I know. What are we doing driving, you know, having ministers and people being driven around in cars made in China? Doesn't make any sense to me. Make it make sense. Charlie Rowley, thank you very much indeed. I'm Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK on DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. It is Thursday, the 6th of February. A very, very good morning to you. The sun has been rising brilliantly through the week here. We've been looking at some fantastic sort of orange skyscapes lighting up. In fact, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, lit up the entire city with his bathed in this kind of really amazing orange amber light. It was fantastic. We'll keep you up to date on that. It's not quite up yet, the sun, but we are. We've got lots to do. Charlie Rowley's here. He was here earlier. And then he went away. Now he's come back again because he likes it so much. Welcome back, Charlie. Thank you. Good to see you. We've got Prime Minister's questions to talk about. We've got the Chagos Islands to talk about. We've got Nigel Farage. Of course, the big stories on the front pages and of the papers this morning, very much considering the migrant situation. Kemi Badenoch basically coming out and saying that she wants to crack down on migrants in this country. She wants to make it much more difficult for people to come here from other countries and become UK citizens. She says, I will ban migrants who claim benefits from becoming UK citizens. As I've said earlier, I wasn't aware that migrants could claim benefits because most of the time whenever I said that they were on benefits, and we would be told by all manner of lefties, oh no, that's not possible, they're not allowed to work, they're not allowed to claim benefits. But we know an awful lot of people come here on work visas, a lot of people come here on student visas, and when those visas run out, that's when they can claim the benefits. We've got front page of The Sun, which is all about Liam Payne, an exclusive interview with his former girlfriend, Kate Cassidy, 25 years of age. I wasn't to blame for Liam's death. Heartbroken story. Very good exclusive in The Sun. Also, on the front page of The Times, we've got a story about social media cancer putting children's lives at risk, and civil servants being told to find efficiency savings or risk facing the sack. And of course, we still have the reverberations from the police decision yesterday not to even bother investigating Keir Starmer for his voice coach shenanigans, because apparently it's more than 3 years since it happened. Therefore, it's beyond the statute of limitations. Well, I've got one question for them. Why did they not say that when they were first asked about it, instead of saying that the reason they weren't going to investigate it was because nobody had complained? It all smells a bit fishy to me. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on.
Angela, that's a nice dress. Where did you get it? Oh, I don't know. It was for notes. Do you like it?
That's from Gus there, a very talented man. Welcome to Morning Glory. Charlie, welcome back. We've got a little exclusive here as well from the Talk team, where they found out that deportations flights since Keir Starmer got into office 6 months ago have cost UK taxpayers about £11.6 million in the first 6 months. An investigation has found that on average £862 was spent on each flight per foreign criminal or failed asylum seeker. The Home Office don't like giving out these figures. We had to dig and dig and dig and get them to come up with them. What's not clear, though, is 13,500 people have been sent back. It's not clear whether they also had their dependents being sent back with them. They won't give us a number of actual people that got on actual planes, you know, and obviously I don't think people will mind the cost of it because it's probably cheaper than keeping them here. But again, so much kind of murkiness and clouds, you know, that you can't get at the truth. We can't find out what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think incompetence needs to be thrown into that, because I genuinely think that sometimes the Home Office just simply don't know the numbers.
No.
I mean, I remember, again, you know, totally different scenario, but the Homes for Ukraine scheme, when we were bringing in, obviously, lots of people fleeing Ukraine, and, you know, we were told at a different department, but adjoining to the Home Office, different figures every hour about the numbers of people that could house and the numbers of people that were coming in. So the Home Office, I just don't think...
It's just too big to be kind of, you know, it's just too... You can't control it because there's so many different departments, there's so many different bits of it, you know, that one side of it doesn't know what the other side's doing.
I think that's true, and I think, you know, because they are so, you know, they pride themselves so much for some reason. They sort of, you know, look at themselves, I think, as a department that's sort of, you know above any other. Once they get a bit of information, the situation's probably moved on since then. So they'll want to give out some numbers, so they'll want to say how many people they've deported, but what they won't want to tell you, which is also a number that we do know is the amount of illegal people that actually come into and made that small boat crossing, which is highest numbers this year on record.
They've previously admitted when asked that they've also lost track of an awful lot of people, you know, because some people who they take to these hotels just sort of get up one morning and wander off and nobody knows where they've gone.
Exactly, and nobody should be under any illusion when the Labour government, and I'd bet your bottom dollar that when they come out to say, oh, we've fixed the crisis and actually we've got through the backlog, what they've done is effectively granted the majority of people asylum. It's an amnesty, and it's not saying, hooray, you know, we've cleared the whole problems, you know, and we've deported numbers of people. They've basically allowed a lot of people more to come to this country because they can think that they can control the numbers and know where those people are by giving them settled status or by giving them citizenship, as opposed to doing the hard thing and the right thing, which is to deport people, or, by the way, have a deterrent in the first place to stop people coming in.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, I find it slightly ironic that Kemi Badenoch, who was in a government, or part of government that was in for 14 years, who is now no longer in government, has now got a great big plan, because she's leader of the opposition, to stop migrants from becoming UK citizens. Well, you know, surely she might have had a couple of opportunities to do that, you know, when they actually would have been able to.
Well, yes, and I think it's having said that she wasn't going to announce any sort of policies for at least 2 years to try and get at you. I think it's come a bit of a surprise to some people. It's interesting, you know, that people can't claim people that come here illegally. She's saying, sorry, people that come here legally aren't able to claim settled status, which you can do after 5 years after being in the country. That should double to 10, and you shouldn't be someone that claims benefits or housing benefit or social security. You know, you need to make a contribution rather than be a
and she's going to say basically you should be making a certain level of income in order to not to be a drain on society. But of course, all of these things that you can say all of that, but you know, the person that says I'm making, you know, 50,000 a year and I've got a wife and 2 kids, therefore I'm going to be, you know, putting money into the tax, you know, kind of collection plate, that might be fine, but then they lose their job and then they can't get another job and then they're on benefits. And you know, everybody knows it's a racket. You know, I mean, I don't know if we're the only people sitting here that know this, but I'm pretty sure that everybody, if you actually, you know, scratch the surface a little bit and go, you know, there's immigration lawyers, there's human rights lawyers, there's all manner of bogus schemes going on. You know, the Home Office, I'm sure, are not that difficult to hoodwink. You know, if you say, oh yeah, I'm living here with my mother. Oh, your mother looks a bit old. Oh yeah, actually it's not my mother. You know, it's just somebody that brought with me. You know, nobody really knows what's going on.
Yeah, and I think where there might be, just something off the top of my head where this policy might come unstuck, is actually that instead of focusing on the numbers, which I think we have to focus on the numbers, don't get me wrong, but I think if you actually said to someone, then this is where Priti Patel, I think, fell down and fell short the other week, where she was sort of saying the brightest and the best. You know, that's why the numbers are so high. Well, it's clearly not the brightest and the best. But if it were, and if you could actually look an interviewer in the eye and say, well, you want to take that million people, this is an amount that works in the NHS, this is an amount that actually work in AI, this is an amount working in tech. If you can legitimately say they are the brightest and the best and they're all making a contribution, I don't think anyone could really have an argument with that. But if you've got people who are actually working in the NHS, or people that are working in agriculture, or people that are working in construction, that aren't maybe in the highest paid jobs, where they might actually be doing a job but are being supported by a benefit, or their dependent is on benefits, do you deport those people or not? Because they're doing a job that actually needs to be done, but they're not going to fit the criteria that Kemi's after. It's a halfway house that doesn't really fix anything.
Despite the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are coming into this country, I mean, 1.2 million people came in the last 2 years legally, right, to do various things, either student visas or work visas, and then you've got the 100,000 plus that have come illegally, and yet there's still loads and loads of sectors of society where we don't have enough people to do the job. So something's not making sense. Let's have a look at what happened in Prime Minister's questions yesterday, though, because a couple of things came up. One was Nigel Farage. He decided to ask a question, and he was granted the right to ask a question, but he was then treated as if he was some kind of malingerer by the Speaker of the House, and kind of treated with pretty much disdain by the Prime Minister. Let's have a look.
If I can assure the honourable member for Rugby that Reform want healthcare to be free at the point of delivery. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. There appears to be some panic on that side of the House. I'm not surprised. To ask the Prime Minister, I'd like some advice, please. What do I say? Oh, they really are panicking, aren't they?
Order.
I want to get this question over with. All you're doing is ensuring it goes on forever. Quick question.
So, I mean, I don't think anybody else in the Houses of Parliament is treated like that. You know, I don't really care. I'm sure Nigel Farage has got big enough and ugly enough to deal with it. But that's the Speaker of the House basically, you know, I would say, dissing him in common parlance, you know, dismissing him, treating him as if he's not worth listening to, making out that I want to get this question over with, i.e. because it's a waste of time, you know, and he's getting heckled by people in a way that nobody else would be.
Yeah, and I think that clip, for anybody that might have been enjoying themselves for some reason in the House of Commons by heckling Nigel, that's one thing, but that clip will just go beyond the House of Commons and to the country,
of course,
where people are turning to reform because Nigel is saying a lot of things that people connect with, that people believe with. If they see other politicians just heckling him, shouting him down, that just plays into Nigel Farage's house.
But this is why he's so smart, because he knows how everybody feels about the House of Commons. He knows how most people feel about Prime Minister's questions. I mean, we used to cover it here on Talk, but we don't anymore because, you know, it's something that you do sort of highlights from now, if you can find any, because at the end of the day, you know, just having it on live, immediately the numbers on the station would fall off a cliff because nobody wants to watch it.
Exactly, and not that any Labour strategist listening will sort of take my advice, but the only advice I would give the Labour Party or the Labour government is that if you want to tackle reform, which is what they say they want to do, and there's been lots of reports about how they're now setting up ads to attack reform because they are the biggest threat, I would not attack reform.
No.
I would hug them tight.
Yeah.
It's a bit like how the UK government should have dealt with, and did deal with the SNP.
Well, look at what happened to Donald Trump. I mean, all you're going to see is exactly how it went on in 2016. I mean, you can argue until the cows come home about whether he won it in 2020. He says he finally has sort of admitted that he didn't. But at the end of the day, he got more votes in 2020 than he got in 2016, and he still lost. But an awful lot of people voted for him, 80 million people. I mean, in this last election, 90 million people. And I always find it amusing to watch Sky and other outlets who kind of, every now and again, when they do anything for America, they have to sort of justify it and say, well, of course, you know, a lot of people do agree with Donald Trump, right? And there's quite a lot in the papers today about his Gaza plan, you know, to turn the Gaza Strip into literally the New Jersey Shore, put a couple of Trump casinos up and all this kind of thing. And I mean, it's a typical Trump statement, isn't it? You know, I don't think he had in his mind the idea that they would suddenly ethnically cleanse Palestine. I think he genuinely thought, you know, give people some jobs, build some hotels, make it into a lovely part of the world that people want to go on holiday to. And he's being roundly condemned by all and sundry, you know, from the UN to, you know, to Palestine, all saying he's trying to get ethnically cleansing going. And, you know, the point is that what he says, he knows his audience and he knows what the people of America want to hear. And so that's why he keeps getting re-elected.
Yeah, and I think, look, you know, I think you're totally right. He had no intention and is not thinking about ethnically cleansing or sort of moving people out, but he's literally saying, in a practical level, as someone that's worked in real estate, this is now a piece of land that's, you know, clearly been totally bombed, totally sort of brought down. It needs to be rebuilt. How can we rebuild it on the one hand?
For the people that live there.
And for the people that live there, but also bring a bit of peace and hope, because...
But what I'm saying, his enemies have done exactly what the House of Commons MPs were doing there to Nigel Farage, is sort of, you know, taking the worst-case scenario and making out that that's what he wants to do, you know, and making him evil and horrible and, you know, a ghastly individual, and how can you possibly support this man, you know, because he's rotten to the core and evil. And, you know, that doesn't work. Because now he's the president.
And by saying maybe the most extreme thing, or presenting it in the most sort of, you know, extreme and unconventional way, it's shocked everybody. But that shock now means that everybody has to move to do something about it.
But as you hear people making voice notes and sending them in to us here every single day, you know, people are sick to death of politics as usual. They want common sense. This is the year of common sense. We've called it that. We call ourselves the home of common sense. You know, it's a bit like the transgender argument. You know, don't stand and tell me that that is a woman when it's not a woman. You know, I'm sorry, nobody's buying it anymore. Let's have a look at what Kemi Badenoch got up to yesterday, though. She wasn't talking so much about migration. She was talking about the Chagos Islands.
When Labour negotiates, our country loses. Yesterday, we heard the government offered £18 billion for Mauritius to take our territory in the Chagos Islands. This is money that belongs to our children and their children. This is an immoral surrender, so North London lawyers can boast at their dinner parties.
The last government conducted 11 of the 13 rounds of those negotiations. And, Mr. Speaker, They were right to do so. That is why this government has completed that process. When she became leader of the opposition, I said to her that I would give her a briefing on any national security issue if she asked for it. That's very important to the way that we run our democracy. She has not asked for a briefing on the Chagos Islands. And that's because she's more interested in chasing reform than in national security.
Well, I tell you what, Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves are sitting either side there of Keir Starmer. Look as though they've just been condemned to death, haven't they? They look very pleased with themselves, or indeed him.
No.
I mean, you don't see them kind of, cheering and sort of, lauding him for defending the Labour government, do you?
No.
I think you wonder if two of them are both sitting there going, I could do this.
Yeah,
I could do this, and she's going, what about her? Do you think she? What do you reckon? So they're all at each other's throats like rats in a sack.
Yeah, and
you can see it.
And it's not the first time that we've heard, obviously, the new book out by, which has been serialised in the Sunday Times, Get In, by how, Keir Starmer himself has said, I might have to resign over the by-election.
Well, there's clearly an awful lot of disquiet inside the corridors of power, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
No question. Yeah. I've got this from Norman in Reading. He says, now that the Met have declared a 3-year cut-off for COVID-19 breaches, can I now come clean about driving from Reading to Nottingham to visit my mother during Christmas of 2020? We both live alone, without the Thames Valley Police feeling my collar. Well, apparently so. You can absolutely come clean, because the police have only got one rule, surely, for everybody, haven't they? Or could it be that they are two-tiering again?
Well, let's hope not. But,
I can't speak for Thames Valley Police, of course. They might have a different view.
I'd like to think that all police forces were under the same sort of bracket of, if you outside the 3-year rule.
You would like to think so.
I'd like to think so, but that would be too sensible.
Speaking of the police, I think we've got some figures, actually, have we not, of how much the police have spent on the various different policing matters that they've had to deal with, like the pro-Palestine marches. I think they spent something like 53 million quid over the course of the last 12 months policing that. As if you don't need another reason for them not to allow them to go on in the way that they do. It's an awful lot of money, isn't it? 53 million on pro-Palestine protests instead of fighting crime. They've also squandered £1.4 million on diversity and bringing more staff in to fill up their DEI quotas. Marvellous, isn't it?
Yeah, and that money could be going to more police officers on the street. It could be going to fund the winter fuel allowance that the Chancellor had to take away, or felt that's a political decision that she's made. Everybody will be, I think, up in arms at the amount of money that is wasted in every government department. Yeah. When you hear stories like this, you think, what on earth has that money been spent on?
And who's deciding to spend it?
And who's deciding to spend it? You just want the best people for the jobs.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what colour, creed your police officers are. If they are able to make the arrests that you need to be made, then rock on. Good on them.
Exactly.
You don't need money spent on...
You would think that would be straightforward. One final one, I know you've got to rush off. Are you experiencing Zoom fatigue? You're obviously not, because you're here in person. But of course, some people apparently have now been on Zoom for so long that they've started to suffer as a result, a common phenomenon known as facial appearance dissatisfaction. I think that means you don't like looking at yourself in the mirror, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I hadn't looked in the mirror this morning. I didn't like what I saw. Went back to bed.
Exactly. It's people that have seen their face in the corner of the screen on Zoom meetings, and they don't like their own appearance, so therefore they feel self-conscious, and then sort of, another Zoom meeting, I've got to look at myself again in the... Do
you think there are people that put makeup on for their Zoom meetings? And I don't mean women who would normally put makeup on. I mean people who wouldn't normally put makeup on.
That's a very good question.
Yeah. You have, haven't you? You have.
I'll look myself in the Zoom, and I'll...
Listen, I'm wearing makeup. I'm not fighting for a position of strength here.
Well, I always like to come in because there's no face other than yours that I want to see.
Indeed, that's
on
very
breakfast
kind.
programme.
Very
so
kind. Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Have a good rest of the day. We've got lots more to do. We've got many more people to talk to between now and 10 o'clock. Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike. Brian, Southend here. I'm fuming, mate. I'm absolutely furious. I don't know how much longer this country can go on as it is. Democracy, there is no democracy. They're just telling us what to do. We're becoming a socialist government. We might as well join up with Russia rather than the USA, the way things are going. This man's a complete idiot. The Labour Party are idiots. And now they're stopping elections. What else are they going to stop? Very soon, all our money will go to them. We'll work just for a bit of bread and butter.
Absolutely right. People are sick and tired of all of this, I tell you. Starmer's on the way out, I promise you. It smacks of another Durham, says Barry. Once again, Starmer takes us for fools. Why would a voice coach be in attendance at a meeting to work through the details of Brexit? She's not an elected MP. She's not a key worker. She's not a Brexit specialist. Are you a Brexit specialist? No, I once took my top off in a movie, though. Does that count? Yeah. Well, it's a bit continental, I suppose. This is Talk. Let's not forget, 2 days ago we were told the police weren't investigating the situation because nobody had complained about it, right? So the police didn't tell us then, which they should have done if this was not cooked up in the last 24 hours. Yeah. Why didn't they say 2 days ago, well, we won't be investigating it because it's happened more than 3 years after the event, and so therefore the law no longer applies? It didn't say that then. No. Guess why? Because there wasn't a law that applied. Because surely that's what they should have said. And then nobody would have complained, and that would have been the end of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:25. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. Carolina in Bath says, morning, Mike. Rodney Starmer must surely get his comeuppance sometime soon. You, along with many others, have got his number. When you show his old lockdown clips, he makes me recoil. Unfortunately, he thinks he's untouchable. Confessions of the Prime Minister on a cinema near you soon. Keep at it. You are onto him. Well, I mean, a lot of people not happy with him, including some people inside the Labour Party. But we've got now Tom Greatrex is here with us. He's with the Nuclear Industry Association, Chief Executive, in fact, I should say. We'll come on to you in a second. We've just got a quick voice note from Rob.
Morning, Mike. Rob from West Yorkshire. So, it was a work-based event, and only Rachel Reeves turned up. And out of all the workers in the Labour Party, they felt that somebody 65 miles away in Brighton was more important than the rest of them. Unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable, but it did happen. I mean, you know, it's almost as though somebody told them it was a great idea. But Tom, welcome to Morning Glory. Nice to see you. Front page of the Telegraph today. Nuclear reactor NIMBYs to be swept aside, it says here. The Prime Minister is going to make some kind of speech, I think, today to lift restrictions on where nuclear power plants can be built. Is this a result of some very good and well-done lobbying?
Well, it's a result of a reality that we've got, which is we need to get urgently, a lot of energy infrastructure built to give us enough electricity to run our lives at a time when our existing nuclear fleet is coming to the end of its life. So it's probably overdue, but it's very welcome.
Yeah, right. Because up until now, there's been kind of arguments within the sort of the green area, I suppose, isn't there, about whether it's renewable energy that we need, whether it's wind farms, whether it's solar panels, whether it's, you know, bringing in energy from outside of Britain. But it's very clear that that's not going to work in the short term, is it? It's not going to give us whatever energy security that we might need.
Well, if your electricity comes from sources that are dependent on the weather, sometimes you get more and sometimes you get less. Right, so how do you fill the gap?
Right.
If you do it by burning gas to produce electricity, we import a lot of that. The price of that goes up very significantly. So a couple of weekends ago, when it wasn't very windy, the price of electricity went way up. And increasingly what we're seeing is it's getting very, very tight how much electricity we've got. And that's the real worry, that if we don't get on with it, you know, we're going to end up...
And the worry has been, hasn't it, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, that, you know, we have been quite close at certain points to blackouts. Ed Miliband went before a select committee and denied that was true, but and I've spoken to people who say that he's wrong about that. In fact, it's been very close.
Well, if you look at the stats that come from the system operator, we've got very close a couple of weekends ago. We've got close over the last few years a few times, and that's because we've got a mix of electricity generation now that is significantly reliant on the weather. And when the weather patterns don't add up, what do you do? And that's where nuclear comes in, because nuclear doesn't matter what the weather is. It produces a lot of electricity for a very long period of time, but it takes time to get the things built. And that's partly because they're big things that take time to get built, but it's partly because all around the process of getting them done, there's a huge amount of bureaucracy, there's loads of rules, there's different regimes, one on top of the other, and it makes it really, really complicated. And that's what today, from what I understand, the Prime Minister's going to talk about, is something that it seems they've got now. And now we want to see that, change happen to make sure we can get them built quicker. Yeah, I mean, the Tories had a plan, did they not, at one point to build what they called sort of, I don't want to call them boutique nuclear power stations, but sort of smaller versions reactors, that would sit at the end of your road and basically, would not be the things that kind of scare people. I mean, I know that it's probably old-fashioned to say that, but if somebody was told there's going to be a big nuclear power plant at the end of your road that looks a bit like Dungeness, they'd probably go, well, no thanks very much. Depends where you are. Places that have had them in the past, they like them, and they want new ones. Okay. So what is that the plan, to build smaller ones still? Is that still what Labour wants to do? Yeah, large and small. Although small, they're not necessarily that small. They're not necessarily at the end of the road. They're more likely to still be on industrial sites or former industrial sites. Okay. And they'll still produce a lot of power, but they are smaller than the big one that's being built at Hinckley, for example. And the problem as well for building these things seems to be that not many people know how to do it, right? So it's either the French, who've, I think, now stopped building them, or the Chinese. Well, the French they're going to build a whole load more in France and around the world, so they can do it, and they still are able to do it. But yeah, we don't have, at the moment, a large-scale UK We don't technology. Have our own sort of expertise. But we do, well, we have expertise in the supply chain. So what's happening at Hinckley, 2/3 of the contracts are UK companies. So a lot of the building happens from UK companies, a lot of supply chains to UK, but the technology doesn't come from the UK originally, although Rolls-Royce is one of the small modular reactor technologies, which is UK. Okay. Now, as far as what we've seen of Keir Starmer, I'm not going to ask you to be political, you don't have to be. You can if you want. But, a lot of what he announces that he's going to do then ends up not happening. That he'll say, right, we're going to do this, we're going to roll out that, we're going to have this review, we're going to have that. As soon as this happens, everything's going to be released. And it doesn't seem to quite work like that. So how confident are you, or would you be, that the old spade in the ground conversation, who's going to start building a nuclear reactor after today? Well, firstly, there is a decision pending from the government for final investment in Sizewell. Sizewell is ready to go. Right. So that is all spades in the ground. It's got all its permissions, it's ready. This is about all the things that need to come after that. And you're absolutely right, it's easy to say it. But we've got to see, and we'll be pressing to make sure that the review of regulation, the changes in planning law that are talked about, or going to be talking about today, actually happen. Yes. It's really critical. If we don't do that, we make it take much longer, more expensive, more difficult to build the infrastructure that we need. So if it all went well today and it all followed from that, how quickly can you have nuclear power, powering more of the national grid then? Well, if from today what you get is changes that are made in the next year or so, that enable you then to start building, the investment decisions that need to happen alongside it, the technology choice that goes through the work that's happening at the moment, that means in a year's time we can say that's what we're going to do and where, and then the build process for small modular reactors about 10 years, and we've got starting to get them on the bars and ready to deliver electricity. Now, you say 10 years is a long time. It is. 10 years ago, I was making much the same points, or 8 years ago when I started this job, to previous governments and about the urgency of it.
Well, 20 years ago, Nick Clegg was kiboshing the idea, wasn't he?
Yeah, in 2010 he said, it will take too long and we won't have it until the 2020s. Well, look, if we'd done what we should have done then and built them, we wouldn't have been relying on importing gas to burn and hoping and worrying about the weather to produce our electricity.
Right, exactly right. So it doesn't sound to me, I was going to ask you, how soon will our bills come down? It doesn't sound to me as if you'll have any control over that for quite some time.
Well, when Hinkley starts generating electricity, that will produce 7% of our electricity, and the benefit of that is the price, you know what it is, and it's stable. So the fluctuations you get, and we've had over the last few weeks when it gets cold and it's not windy, will be reduced. So you'll start to have a positive impact on bills relatively soon. But the more you do, once you've got it in place, you know exactly what your electricity price is going to be for over a long period of time, because the fuel input for nuclear is such a small part of it.
So you're not going to promise us that their bills will be £300 cheaper?
I can't promise that because I'm not in charge of.
Well, neither can the government, but they did it anyway.
Well, politicians make promises.
Yes, they do.
What today's about and what they're talking about today is an integral part of actually starting to have delivery. There's a difference between rhetoric and delivery. Let's get on with delivery.
Sure. Have you had any dealings with GB Energy?
A little bit, yeah. There's a thing called GB Nuclear, which is focused most on the nuclear bit, but GB Energy is in the process of being set up.
Well, that's what they keep telling us. We saw their first interview with Jürgen Meyer this week, and he doesn't seem to have much of a plan. He doesn't seem to know what he's doing. I mean, they don't seem to have an office, they don't seem to have a website, they don't seem to have a business, really.
Well, look, this is one of the things. If you're setting up new things, they take time to get done, and this is why. What's good about today is it's focusing on the problems there actually are, rather than saying we'll set up a new body to do it all.
But what's your sense of what they will do, though, GB Energy? Because I don't think anybody knows.
Well, I think part of it is about trying to ensure that the investment that comes in for various different things happens, and that's driven by an organisation that's focused on it rather than a government department.
But effectively, it is a government department, isn't it?
Well, I think it's an agency that's set up by it's set up by government, but it's not part of the civil services.
But it's funded by government.
But it's funded by government,
right?
I think,
and it's not funded privately.
No, but it should be. It's part of its remit is to attract private investment in.
Yeah.
And look, there's a lot of private investment that's interested, particularly in nuclear, actually. And you've seen data centres, Amazon, Google, all those in the US.
But I mean,
let's do
if that's
nuclear.
the case, I mean, you're from the Nuclear Industry Association, right? So presumably you do that, don't you?
But we are not we're a trade association, so we're not in a position to be able to actually get the investment. We can get the interest and get the finance community talking to the nuclear technology, talking to the end users, and that's a big part of it. But actually making the deals happen is a bit more complex than that, and you have to get them all on side.
Well, let's see whether Jürgen is the man. We could have a look at him telling us how he's going to reduce our bills. Have a look at this.
It will help bring energy prices down.
When?
Well, it's a matter for government and policy to decide.
But as the boss of this, and as someone who is driving forward the ambition of the government, you surely have an idea in your head of when that central pledge to the people of reducing their bills by £300 will come into action.
It is not in the remit of Great British Energy to work out exactly how that energy costing gets through to the consumer.
You see what I mean? I'm not really sure what he's doing. I don't think he's sure what he's doing.
Well, the fundamentals of this are, unless we get a lot more energy infrastructure bills will go up.
Yeah.
Right? So we need more.
And they're going to go up, we understand. I think it was mentioned in Parliament yesterday that the energy cap is likely to rise again before April.
Yeah, and why is that energy price cap going up? Because increasingly we're relying on importing gas at prices we can't control.
But we have the most expensive electricity practically in the world, don't we?
No, there's other places are more expensive, but it is
certainly most expensive in Europe.
But it's if you look contrast with France, which has much cheaper electricity. Why is that? Because 85% of the electricity in France is nuclear, built in France. It's energy secure. It doesn't go anywhere else. You can't pick it up and move it. You can't sell it on the international market in the same way. And that's where we need to get better in that direction. And hopefully what they're announcing today, as long as there's follow through on it and it actually happens, will help us get to that position.
Yeah, OK. Good to see you, Tom. Thanks very much indeed. Tom Greatorex, Chief Executive of Nuclear Industry Association. A couple more texts for you. One from Bill in Cheshire. The voice coach from East Germany, for her, the career is over. If only that were true of our useless Prime Minister. And Chuck in Bolton says, Mike, I loved it in PMQs yesterday when Kemi accused him of not answering her question. He countered that she hadn't answered his. This schoolboy stuff. The clue's in the name. Starmer, you total melt. Prime Minister's questions. I know. That is the point. This is, of course, Talk. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:38. I'm Mike Graham. Apparently China's not very happy with the United States of America. I'm just seeing a story here, a bit of breaking news for you, that China have complained to the World Trade Organization about the tariffs that they've had put on them by the United States of America. I mean, are they having a laugh? China, you know, the country that's basically taken over most of the continent of Africa, and raped its mineral products and taken them all back to China to make things like electric cars. China, the same country that moved into Afghanistan the minute that the Americans moved out so that they could take control of all the lithium that was under the ground there. China, the same country that's basically taken over South America and has made sure that almost everything that comes out of the ground there comes via China. Are you seriously telling me that China are going to complain about something that was unfair done to them by America? Dearie me. They say that there are unfounded and false allegations being made about them when it comes to the manufacture of fentanyl, which is the drug, of course, which is completely destroying the fabric of much of southwestern America, if not the rest of it. We shall see. So apparently China doesn't want a trade war. Really? Imagine that. Having wrecked everybody's economy with COVID. And cheers, guys. You know, if I was at the World Trade Organization, I think I'd say, you know, see this? That's a little sign that says, hop it. Get lost. Thanks very much indeed. John the Blacksmith in Upminster says, Mike, asking for a receipt is actually a very good point. Christmas Eve, call-out fee, double time. I'm sure HMRC would be interested. Or was it a cash job? Brilliant show. Yeah, this is the voice coach. Is she charging cash money? Was she doing, you know, surreptitious voice coaching during COVID? I mean, this story gets more ridiculous by the day, doesn't it? Let's talk to Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective, because we mentioned earlier on in the show that the police spent over £53 million on pro-Palestine protests instead of fighting crime. And also, they've squandered £1.4 million on diversity staff. The one thing they are doing, though, is fighting back against London's £50 million phone theft crime wave. Peter Blexley will have something to say about all of that, I'm sure. Mr. Blexley, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Governor.
Now, I don't know where this money goes. I'm sure you can explain it. But whenever I see these big numbers, when they go, you know, well, we've had to police a load of pro-Palestine protests, so that'll be 53 million quid. And you go, well, exactly how does it cost that much money?
Well, by and large, over time, drafting officers away from other roles that they could be performing, giving a service to victims, addressing crimes, investigating crimes, all of which doesn't get done on these Saturdays because thousands of officers are drafted into central London to police these increasingly criminal, hate-filled marches. And one of the most pathetic things I've seen this week about these marches, which should manifestly now be banned, is that unprincipled, pathetic, opportunist weasel of a mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has suddenly, after 17 months, started expressing concerns for people of the Jewish faith who have been too terrified to come into London because of the hate and the anger that they will be confronted with by these marchers.
Absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? And the one thing that I think I'm right in saying is that when the police are asked to police football matches, as they often are by football clubs, the football clubs get the bill, don't they, for the policing of those events. Why can we not send a bill for this kind of stuff to some pro-Palestine organisation or whoever it is that's organising it?
Yeah, it's the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign that run these marches, and I strongly suspect they haven't got two halfpennies to rub together. But with regards to football, generally speaking, policing that's required on the streets, that bill gets picked up by the police. Any policing costs within the stadiums or the grounds, that can be levied upon the football clubs. It's why football clubs are very, very loath to have officers inside the grounds because they have to pay for them.
Right.
But these marches could be stopped. There is sufficient evidence now to show, especially through the latest march of the 18th of January, which, by the way, January's costs for those marches are not factored into the £53 million bill. Right. They haven't been added to it yet. On the 18th of January, that appalling march there were 77 arrests for a variety of crimes, from sexual assault. Yes, somebody was arrested for a sexual assault, assaults on emergency workers, displaying hateful signs and the such like. With that level of criminality, the police have got ample cause to say, no.
Right.
You can't go protesting through the streets of London now. You can have a gathering, stick them all in Hyde Park, put a ring of police around them, don't let them go anywhere, put restrictions on them and send them on their way. That can't be banned, but the protest could be. And now there's a ceasefire in Gaza. The fact that they are going to march on the US Embassy on Saturday is outrageous. There'll be more hate, more arrests, more terror for Jewish people. These should be stopped.
Exactly right, because we said this at the time when they were marching just after the ceasefire was announced. We were like, well, hang on a minute, they've been asking for a ceasefire for about a year, and now suddenly there is one. Why are they still marching? And the reason why so many people were arrested the last time around, Peter, as I'm sure you will be as aware as I am, is that they changed the rules, didn't they? Because they told them they couldn't go to a certain part of London, which was where there was a synagogue, where these horrible, ghastly individuals wanted to goad people going about their religious business on the Sabbath day for the Jewish community. And they all went there nonetheless, and that's why most of them got arrested. So they're clearly not interested in peace. They're not interested in any kind of understanding of anything other than the eradication of Israel. It's as simple as that, which should be, in my view, treated as sympathy with a terrorist organisation.
Absolutely. But let's look at another bunch of these lunatic lefty protesters, if I may. Just Stop Oil.
Yeah.
Their initial demands were for the government to stop issuing gas and oil licences in the North Sea. They blazed that headline demand far and wide. The new government came in, immediately stopped those licences being issued, and yet Just Stop Oil found something else to moan about. Just like this lunatic left lentil-munching bunch of hate-spreading protesters will do on Saturday.
Exactly right. Unbelievable. Let's have a little word about the phone theft crime wave, because you and I know a little bit about that, obviously me having been a victim of it back in October of last year. They seem to have actually taken this one quite seriously, and so I would take my hat off to them if you could tell me that they're doing a good job here.
Credit to the Violent Task Unit of the Metropolitan Police and other officers that have helped seize 1,000 phones in a week and arrest 250 people. Credit for that. But really, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, because there is so much phone theft in London, but some work is better than no work, so I'm pleased. But it just goes to show, we know the police, when they mobilise, when they grasp something as a priority, say, for example, the unacceptable riots of last year, this example that we're talking about today, when they mobilise, when they've got the political will to do something, they can actually do it. So if they decided to get their officers, of which there are hundreds sitting behind desks, if they got them out on the streets, imagine what they could do about shoplifting, for example, which is also at epidemic proportions, assaults and harassment on the public transport system. They could do it if they actually had the will.
Do you know what I found the other day? I found myself in Mayfair, walking around the streets there, and every single shop and every single restaurant and every single hotel that you walk around had some kind of private security caper going on, right? And you could tell that they were very well protected, and the streets felt very safe, funnily enough, because there were people there who clearly were making sure that criminality wasn't taking place, because there are a lot of very wealthy people that walk around those streets. And it struck me for the first time that it was a part of London that I hadn't been to for a while, that actually didn't make me feel like looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. And clearly, you know, the fact that the people there have visible security makes a difference.
And of course, these high-end shops that you'll find in Mayfair, and if people can afford to shop in them, then good luck to them, because I've only ever window shopped. They can afford to pay good, well-trained, reliable security staff who, when you look at them, they're very well turned out and can, of course, shift some furniture if need be. So the cowardly criminals do not want to take these people on, because they will find themselves up against very well-trained, capable people, some of who come from military backgrounds, some of who come from policing backgrounds, and are not afraid to be robust when need be.
Yes.
But this, of course, now is an unfortunate side effect, consequence and necessity of the ever increasingly lawless streets of our nation.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, listen, great to see you, Peter. We haven't seen you for a while, so we'll need to see you again soon. I hope. Keep up the good work. Former Metropolitan Police Detective. Let's get a voice note from James.
James from Blackburn, disappointed with Kemi yesterday. Again, weak. You know, when she got the leadership, everyone was saying, "Oh, she's a very combative character," and she just doesn't seem to be able to get the upper hand of him. PMQs. He was there for the taking yesterday. She should have made him squirm. She should have skewered him. Everyone's giving him too much of an easy ride. You're not, Mike. I mean, he's definitely not getting an easy ride with you. But yeah, really frustrating. I just want him gone.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's saying it now. Even people in his own party are saying it. You know, nobody wants him here. Nobody gets what he's doing. Nobody thinks he's doing a good job. Simon from Middlesbrough says, morning, Mike. Starmer bleating on and on about £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives, and yet he's found billions for the Chagos Islands and a 100-year deal with Ukraine. How? Just how? Well, it's a good question. We'll see if we can find out. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about Trump and Gaza. And he's in a lot of trouble about what he said yesterday, but I'm going to defend it. But we'll find out whether anybody agrees with me. This is Talk.
Starmer, Hermer, Sands don't really like this country. They're a bit ashamed of its past.
Yes.
I'm very proud of our history, but they are not. They're ashamed of it, and they're trying to root out everything like that. Now, this is a really, really big issue about security. I understand.
Well, no, can I say, I want to come to the security issue on that. So, but the interesting thing is, lots of friends, and I heard this on the BBC, as always this morning, giving it back to the Mauritians. The Mauritians never roam checkers. If it's a colonial issue, give it to the Chagosians.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:53. Got this from Will in Carrickfergus, who says, my electricity bill came today and I believe I got charged for the sunlight, the moonlight, the street light, the light of the Holy Spirit and the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, Probably. In instalments, by the way, because it's far too expensive. Now, the papers this morning absolutely chock full of Donald Trump's idea of turning the Gaza Strip into something akin to the Jersey Shore. Let's talk to Avi Meyer now, who's former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. I think, once again, what we've got here, Avi, very good morning to you, is people who want to be offended by what Donald Trump said, trying to make out that he wants ethnic cleansing by another means. I'm not sure that's entirely what he meant at all. What do you think?
Well, good morning, Mike. I don't know that we know entirely what it is that he meant to say, but I think that we're putting a little bit too much currency in the words of someone who is famously unpredictable.
Yeah.
I feel as though this is likely an opening gambit in some kind of broader scheme to bring Saudi Arabia closer to Israel, to mobilize the Middle East against the prospect of a nuclear Iran, and perhaps conclude what he is now referring to as the deal of the millennium. Right. In order to sort of resolve a lot of the outstanding issues here in the Middle East. But the one thing that we all know, and it's very hard to argue against this point, is that whatever has been tried in Gaza up until now simply has not worked.
Right.
We've had one round of war after another. The people there have been living in terrible misery, and something has got to change. And so if this inspires some kind of broader conversation about the future of Gaza, the future of the Middle East, ultimately, I think that could be a good thing.
Well, everybody's talking about how the only future for Gaza is to get rid of Hamas, and at the moment there doesn't seem to be any real roadmap as to how to do that, because we've seen from the exchange of hostages, or rather the handing over of the hostages in Gaza in the last couple of weeks, that Hamas is still very much there and still very much a force to be reckoned with, albeit very much less perhaps than they were. But I took from this that he wanted the people of Gaza to have a kind of an economy they could rely on, an economy that could give them jobs, that could give them opportunities, prosperity, that kind of thing. I didn't at all take from what he said that he wanted to move the Palestinians out of Gaza into some other nebulous part of the Middle East, whether it be Egypt or Jordan or wherever. I think he just said, look, it's not a very good place to live at the moment. It's dangerous. You're likely to be killed by Hamas more than you're likely to be killed by anybody else. So let's change it and make it into a sort of capitalist paradise.
Well, he did suggest in his initial remarks that he was talking about some kind of permanent or at least long-term solution. His colleagues, his officials in the White House have been sort of walking that back over the past 2 days, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the White House spokesperson. Both of them said, no, we're only talking about a temporary move here. Of course, they would be coming back after the Gaza Strip was rebuilt. But the bottom line is that this is a reality that is untenable. People cannot live in the Gaza Strip as it currently is. And as you said, Hamas has to be removed from power. What it takes is some kind of grand scheme that is launched by some very dramatic statement by the President of the United States. I don't think anyone in this region, any of the rational actors in this region, are going to disagree with that.
Right. But Saudi hasn't reacted well to this announcement, has it? So does that mean that he was aiming it at them in some way, shape or form so that they can just get a conversation going, do you think?
I think that's certainly part of it. I know that for quite a long time now, President Trump has very much wanted to bring about a normalization agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia has said that they're not willing to engage in that process without a Palestinian state. Now, I don't know anyone in this region who looks at Gaza and the West Bank today and says, oh, we're ready for a Palestinian state. I think there's acknowledgement that even if that is the ultimate goal in the eyes of many, it's certainly not something that can happen anytime in the near future. And so this is President Trump basically saying, we need to have some movement in the direction of normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. It is key for the development of a regional alliance against the prospect of a nuclear Iran. I'm putting this out there as an opportunity for Saudi Arabia to say, well, actually, we're going to, in exchange for your withdrawal from this statement, take those steps and get closer to Israel. I think that's likely what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to talk to you. Avi Meyer, thank you very much indeed, former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. They're talking about what he thinks Donald Trump meant by talking about changing the look of Gaza, the outlook of Gaza, and the economic prosperity of the place. One here from Phil. It says, who else was in the room when Starmer was having voice lessons? If I had a soft porn actress around my house to teach me how to talk, my missus would have gone mad. Well, with good reason. One from Jeff, who says, there's only one leader who can save GB Energy. Step forward, Sir Dale Vince. And one here from someone who says, our idiot governments successively let our nuclear expertise wither away. Stupid as hell. Kevin in Barnstable says, P.S. please don't mention Nick Clegg. I've just had my breakfast. Sorry about that. And Dan from Kent says, they can heckle Farage all day long for all I care, because we all know Farage is just over 4 years is going to be the big shiny pin to bust that privileged Westminster bubble. Well, I think there's certainly a lot to be said for the way that Nigel Farage is taking on the establishment. A lot of people say now, oh, but he is the establishment now. He's part of the parliamentary process. Well, he's not. But he's having to be very clever at how he proceeds. He's having to be very smart about the way that he does all of that. And so I think he has got them panicking. He has got Labour frightened. He has got Keir Starmer spooked, as if he doesn't need to be spooked about anything more. But we'll talk in the next hour to Peter Hitchens, and we'll find out from him what he makes of it all. We'll also talk, no doubt, about that Lucy Letby press conference that took place a couple of days ago. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about electric cars, because if you've got one, apparently, you shouldn't be saying anything that you don't want the Chinese to hear in it, because apparently they're listening. If you've got a Chinese-made electric car and you work for this government, they've actually been told, people who work in the Department of Defence, do not have conversations in the car because the Chinese are eavesdropping. Simple as that. And now they're upset that the Americans put tariffs on them. Really? Well, well, well. This is Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Farmer, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. The sun is indeed rising. It's a little bit misty out there, a little bit hazy, but lovely looking. It's a very yellow kind of a shade today. I know you think that I've probably got a bit mad sitting up here on the 17th floor of News UK, wondering what colour the sunrise is going to be, but, you know, it keeps me amused. There's a bit of light shining off the buildings opposite. I always feel better when the weather is good, I have to say. You might think that doesn't have any effect on you, but when it's raining and dull and dank and miserable, people feel the same way. When the sun shines, people generally feel better. There is such a thing as seasonally affective disorder, which, funnily enough, doesn't affect me. But there we are. Listen, I know plenty of people that it does, though. We're going to talk to Peter Hitchens in a minute. We're going to ask him about whether he might be suffering from Zoom fatigue. There's a piece on the front page of the Times today which says that there's a common phenomenon from people who continually appear on Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams that they sometimes worry about facial appearance dissatisfaction. I know the feeling. You don't just have to be on Zoom to feel like that. You just have to look in the mirror. For a lot of people. Anyway, we're going to talk about many things, including migrants, of course. Kemi Badenoch suddenly discovered that they didn't get it right when the Tories were in, so now they want to stop people who come here illegally or who have been on benefits here as migrants from ever becoming UK citizens. I didn't know migrants could get benefits, but apparently an awful lot of people do come here on work visas and on student visas, overstay those visas, and then end up on benefits because they can't get any work or they can't find a proper job. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll continue our conversation about Keir Starmer and the voice coach and what on earth happened on Christmas Eve 2020 and why the police have suddenly now said, well, we can't investigate it because it's too far away and too long ago. 3 years is apparently the record, or the limit, rather, of what they can look into from what happened in 2020. But, of course, they could have said that at the beginning of the week instead of saying, well, we're not investigating it because nobody's actually complained. When did this rule get suddenly made? Also, of course, we're going to talk about the state of play with Prevent. You might remember we did an interview with Lord Carlisle a little while ago. He was absolutely sure that Prevent were doing a great job. Well, it turns out the Home Office does not agree. Also, with Peter, we'll talk about Lucy Letby, that big press conference that was held a couple of days ago, which pretty much ripped apart the evidence that was presented. People who gave the press conference, including David Davis MP, said basically there is no evidence at all that any of those babies was killed as a result of a deliberate act by Lucy Letby. Not murder, apparently, according to them, not in any one case. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll keep talking about Donald Trump as well. This is Morning Glory. Alan in Middlesbrough says, I don't know about you, but I was absolutely disgusted and angered by the antics of Labour MPs and the Speaker yesterday during PMQs or PM's deflections. When Nigel Farage tried to ask a question, Reform received over 40% of the nation's vote, and the contempt shown to them by Labour and the Speaker was insulting and reflects their punishing policies thus far. Well, Alan in Middlesbrough, I think you're right. I think also it plays totally into Nigel Farage's hands. He can say, look, this is how they treat me in Parliament. They don't think I have a right to be here, even though I was properly elected. And I'm afraid that the more that they treat him like that, the more votes Reform will get. Simple. Peter Hitchens is here from the Mail on Sunday. Peter, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Good to see you. I don't wish to start with anything as frivolous as this the Zoom business, but I mean it is quite a funny story. Zoom fatigue, apparently. I mean, if you think about it, we've all been doing this madness for quite a while now, haven't we?
Well, maybe we have, but before it began, I used to be on the BBC quite a lot, and I'm now pretty much banned from it. And in fact, I find Zoom much better than the BBC. The BBC, you know this thing about cameramen are always ask before someone comes on TV, are we shooting against this guy or for him?
Right.
And it was always against me, so the shots were always up my nostrils and emphasising my many chins and making me look like a sort of bloated figure from outer space. And seeing myself on Zoom by comparison is quite a relief. I think, well, that's more or less what I look like. I always contrasted how I looked on the BBC with how I looked on the anti-shoplifting CCTV of various shops I visited. I thought, how do I look so different on these from the BBC?
Well, this is it. At least you can control it.
For me, it's a joy, and I'm not complaining.
No, quite. I mean,
this is what I look like.
Well, also, it is quite handy for an awful lot of people. I mean, it did revolutionise what we do. You know, funnily enough, we actually looked different as a TV station when we could be instead of having people sitting in chairs and looking like they were slightly out of place. We could now make these little, boxed scenarios, and it's all very good. But let's move on to the big news of the week, I suppose. Lucy Letby and that remarkable press conference the other day, in which I think I'm right in saying the visiting professor from Canada basically said, you know, there is no evidence whatsoever to say that any of these babies died as a result of murder.
But not just him. It's this extraordinary panel of really the best neonatologists and specialists on this subject in the world who he had assembled. Every single one of them working pro bono. Nobody got a fee. Professor Lee himself flew from his farm in Alberta to London at his own expense and stayed in London at his own expense. These people were working purely out of the goodness of their hearts. And this is because Xu Li himself had been, I think, quite rightly dismayed at the way the Court of Appeal had just brushed off his evidence when he tried to give it to them, and felt that something had to be done because he'd learnt very late in the day, because the story is not big in Canada or indeed anywhere outside this country. He'd learnt very late in the day of this apparent injustice and of the fact that the courts simply weren't interested in hearing any new version. I would say that what happened on Tuesday was that the defence, which Lucy Letby ought to have had in Manchester Crown Court, was finally heard. And if the jury had heard it during that trial, they would have acquitted her on all charges. The problem is that for reasons we don't know, that defence was not heard at the time. And the procedural obsession of judges is to say, oh, well, because the defence could have produced this evidence at the time and didn't, we can't reopen the case. Well, what purpose does that serve?
Right.
It isn't even the policy, as David Rose, who you had on earlier on this week, have made this point. It isn't even the true policy of the appeal court, which has in the past allowed evidence which could, in theory, have been produced in the first trial, because it was just to do so. And this is a simple matter of justice. This woman is sitting in prison for the rest of her life until she dies on the basis of what is increasingly shown to be an inadequate and unfair trial. And if the courts can't put that right, then what are they for?
Well, quite.
I think the moment has come. And I think it's just the problem is it's taking those in charge a while to realise it. I think the Chief Counsel of Cheshire Police, which still claimed to be investigating of the crimes, and the Thirlwall inquiry, and a number of newspaper outlets who continue to treat Lucy Letby as if she's definitely guilty, really do need to wake up to the fact that this press conference and the transcript of it, which is available, and the documents which were produced at it, show that this case simply does not stand up under the simple rule of proven beyond reasonable doubt. It's that there is now enormous reasonable doubt about her guilt.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a sort of computer says no reaction, isn't it? To just go, well, no, you could have done that then, and we didn't do it now. So it's a bit like when you get a parking ticket. No, I'm sorry, you can't appeal that because you don't have any grounds. And you go, well, yeah, but actually it's not my car. Doesn't matter. You still have to pay. You know, it's that kind of attitude that gets, you know, these people the reputation of just being jobs worth. And as you say, if they can't see that there's at least grounds for reconsidering it, then what are they for?
Because that's all we've ever been asking, those of us who have raised that. We haven't said, no, free her immediately without further discussion. We've said, OK, there are procedures. They now need to be followed. And what people don't realise, often you'll get supporters of the verdict say, well, she's had 2 appeals and they've failed. They haven't. What happened was that she tried to get an appeal and the judges refused to let her appeal. It's not they've never heard her appeal. They've refused her leave to appeal, and this is a different thing. And that's an extraordinary stone-faced response to what is increasingly an immensely powerful argument. So I think that it will eventually get through. I compared it to the old story of the executioner, the mythical executioner, who was so good at his job that you cut your head off without you realising you were dead, and if you complained, he'd then say, kindly nod, please.
Right. And
off your head would tumble. And the point is that all these people, the ridiculous Thirlwall inquiry, which is presumed from the start, the guilt of Miss Letby, has not even allowed her lawyer to be represented there, so that her case is treated as dead. It now looks even more ridiculous. There's so many parts of the establishment. And I thought, actually, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, was saying on Sunday last to Laura Kuenssberg that she didn't want to intervene in operational matters. And I actually agree with that. I think ministers should, by and large, stay out of court decisions. On the other hand, her cabinet colleague, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says some pretty stern things about people like me.
He's very sure that she's guilty, isn't he?
which I think he needs to reconsider, because he's the one who needs to be asked, because he has actually come out and as I say, basically treated the people who are actually stating doubts as if they were doing something wicked. And I'll say one other thing here, because it comes up all the time: the question of the parents of the babies who died and who suffered. Nobody, particularly anybody who's parent of children, doubts their grief and distress or fails to sympathise with it. But the people who raise this question say, well, you shouldn't be bringing this up because it will distress the parents. They never said that when the police began to investigate the case and to put forward the theory that there had been murders. Yeah. Now, that must also have been highly distressing for the parents. But I would have said, if there'd been at that time, if asked, if there's been a serious case to suggest that there had been murders, they had to investigate whatever effect it had on the parents. And I think now there's a serious case that there may not have been murders. Likewise, there has to be an investigation. And although we all have total respect for the parents, how would it benefit them if they'd been told something that was untrue and turned out not to be?
Yes.
And there are other parents in this as well, which one might mention, the parents of Miss Letby, who have gone through the most terrible, harrowing and distressing experience. And if she is not guilty, they deserve some sympathy as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. You may or may not have been as interested as I have been in the latest developments with old Keir Starmer and his COVID lockdown voice coach. I don't know whether you've been intrigued by that or not. I'm slightly intrigued by the way the police have suddenly decided that it's too long ago to bother looking into.
It is a bit odd, isn't it? Sometimes the police will there's a great fashion now for reopening cold cases. 20, 30 years ago, it seems odd that they should be particularly opposed to investigating this one. I mean, I do think that there was a lot of nonsense talked about it, but the problem for me in this has always been that, as you well remember, I believe that all these precautions were ludicrous anyway. So it's rather hard for me to demand the severe prosecution of people who broke rules, which I thought were ridiculous. So although I look on with the spectacle with some amusement, I can't really join in with any passion.
No, I think you're right. But it does show how hypocritical, as we knew at the time, these people are, because clearly they've now more or less admitted that it was a breach of some kind, but he doesn't want any investigation to go on, so they've now kind of cooked up this idea that, well, it's so long ago, nobody really cares. You know, suddenly it went from being a voice coach lesson to some kind of work event, which Rachel Reeves was also contended with.
There are two groups of people in this country who always know where power lies at any given time and act accordingly. One is bookmakers and the other is the police.
Right.
You can rely on them to know what's going on. And if the police start taking an interest into Keir Starmer's lockdown behaviour, then you'll know that Labour is on its way out.
Yes. I think that's a very good point. You got a piece of the Mail today, page 17. Frenzy over knives is crazy. Ignores the real reason demented killers stalk our streets. I had a very interesting interview with Lord Carlisle. I don't know if you saw it a couple of weeks back, where he was as the sort of custodian of Prevent for a while. He was given.
Indeed, I actually quite like him because he was very helpful to me in another case. So
he wasn't very helpful to me, I'm afraid.
Sorry about that.
I'll play you a clip.
Can't be perfect, can you?
No, you can't. I mean, listen, it would be wrong if everyone was treated as both the same way. Have a look at what he had to say about Prevent.
Right.
You have to remember that Prevent is a scheme that depends on cooperation. And I find it very difficult to believe that this perpetrator would have cooperated with Prevent. That may be the reason why he was not admitted to the Prevent programme, which is very successful with many people, but not all.
Well, I would have to say that I would disagree with you on that as well, because Prevent is clearly not fit for purpose. Would you not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all.
What exactly has been good that Prevent has done?
Prevent has done what it says in on the tin.
Well, it hasn't prevented anything, has it? It hasn't prevented young children being killed. No, it hasn't prevented young children from being killed. It hasn't prevented the London Bridge attacker from killing people when he came to Fisherman's Hall. You know, it has failed multiple times to protect the British public. So therefore, the word Prevent is not even a suitable moniker for the organisation.
Can I now answer your question?
Please do.
Or whichever question you want me to answer.
Well, you tell me what successes Prevent has provided us with.
I was about to, but you interrupted me during my
well, I'm sorry, you're obviously not used to robust conversations, are you? Well, yeah, because I'm not going to be spoken down to like some kind of child, okay? I don't know who you think you are. Just because you're a lord does not give you the ability to lord it over the rest of the public, okay? So talk to me as an equal, or else you can get lost, frankly.
I thought you were a journalist.
No, I am a journalist. Yes, I am.
I'm going to answer your question if you'll shut up for a minute.
Go ahead.
Right. Prevent has done a great deal of good. Prevent has prevented large numbers of people from becoming terrorists, but it does not succeed in every case, and you could not expect it to succeed in every case.
I mean, you can see where things weren't going to go well there, really, couldn't you? I mean,
it was very enjoyable.
It was. I enjoyed it. I'm not sure he did.
I think he enjoyed telling you to shut up.
He did. Yeah.
I think he did. I think he finally got into the spirit of the occasion and thought, right, okay, here we go then. But don't underestimate him. He's a clever man, but he had a difficult brief there, because I think the problem with Prevent is and always will be that it can't ever prove that it's achieved anything.
No,
I'm not sure that it does. I'm no great advocate of this kind of intervention. And when it fails, its failures are 3 million times more evident than its alleged successes. So he had a difficulty there. But as I say, I think when he finally got into the spirit of the occasion and gave you a left hook back, I thought that was
absolutely right.
The problem with it is that these people are not political.
No.
And I get terrible trouble for saying this, but I will insist upon it. They're as political as rhubarb. They don't know anything about politics or understand anything about politics. You have serious terrorism. Then look at someone like Martin McGuinness, who succeeded in most of his aims and ended up having dinner with the Queen at Windsor Castle wearing white tie and tails, or at Yasser Arafat, who became a semi-head of state and was welcome in the White House. The terrorists who are serious about what they do have carefully thought out motives and choose their methods to suit them. Chasing around, murdering people in small provincial towns is not what they do. These are the actions of people who are out of their minds.
Yeah.
And what we need to ask ourselves is why we now have so many people on our streets who are out of their minds. And there are two basic answers to this. One of them is that one of the greatest social changes of our time has been the almost total de facto decriminalization of many drugs, particularly marijuana, which is associated very closely. I can't say it causes because the research has not been done, but the correlation is extremely strong. It's associated strongly with severe mental illness, and many of whose users appear in courts in totally unpolitical cases, accused of and convicted of severe acts of violence. The myth that it's a peaceful drug and a soft drug really does need to be dispensed with. And the other is that in 1961, an obscure politician called Enoch Powell, who you may have heard of, who was Minister of Health, just proposed the demolition or sale of huge numbers of mental hospitals in which seriously mentally ill people used to be housed and treated and kept safe. And because this kind of thing saves a lot of money, which always appeals to governments, it was done, unlike so many government policies, and more or less completed. And it's now harder to get into a mental hospital than it is to get into an Oxbridge college. And therefore there are many, many people, and Callacane was one of them, who are in so-called care in the community where there is really no supervision of them at all. We should not be surprised, therefore, if these things happen, and to say, well, let's have blunt knives. It's such a ridiculous
response. I know, it's ridiculous. It is.
And to say, let's try and track these people down and see if they can be persuaded not to be terrorists anymore when they were never terrorists in the first place, isn't going to work either. There are simple things you can do. There is a law in this country. It's never been repealed. If you're caught in possession of marijuana, you can be sent to prison for 5 years and given an unlimited fine. I don't recommend this on a first offence, but I do think that if we enforce this law, there'll be a lot less marijuana use and many, many fewer crazy people on our streets. And it would be a lot more effective than trying to grind all the points off the knives. By the way, did you know that King Louis XIV of France in 1669 proposed this method to reduce crime, to round the ends of all knives? The only result really was the increasing popularity of the fork, as people couldn't have points wanted knives when they were at dinner anymore to spear their food with, so they started using forks to do that.
Right.
And that the effect on crime, I think, is unknown, but I would imagine was small. It really, people are not thinking when they come up with these things. They're not thinking when they propose the restriction of the sale of knives.
No.
There are so many knives in this country. A crazy person or an evil person could kill you with a ballpoint pen.
Yeah.
They don't need a knife or a screwdriver. There are so many things. But a sane, well-intentioned person wouldn't kill you with a machine gun.
No.
It's not the weapon. It's the person who uses it, and that's what we have to be concerned. I'll tell you another weapon which is very freely available in this country, and which Callaghan also used, just a motor car. He charged people with a van that he'd stolen, and we see this in countries where there are effective gun bans, such as China. People use cars to kill. And again, these people, when you examine them, they turn out to be crazy. They're not. We just have to get into our heads the fact the biggest change in our society has been the abandonment of residential mental health care and the growth in the number of people who have become actually insane as a result of using mind-altering drugs.
Peter, good to talk to you as ever. We've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens' column today, The Frenzy Over Knives, is crazy. Well worth a read, page 17. Coming up, we're going to be talking about what's in the Sun today as well, because there's a big piece there about the Chagos Islands and what on earth is going on. We're going to talk to Jack Elsom coming up right after this.
I'm a local councillor. I was in the health scrutiny panel, and I said, having been somebody with an experience in the health and social care background, I've seen firsthand what it's like for people with a genuine case of anxiety and depression. But I said that it's become too common now. People are throwing it around far too flippantly, with children aged 8, 9, 10 years old going to teachers saying, "Miss, I'm depressed." And I know this because I speak to teachers firsthand. Children shouldn't know what depression is. They should be out playing with their friends, enjoying life.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, and this, of course, is the home of common sense. It's 8:27, and we're going to be talking some more about the common sense overtaking America right now with Donald Trump. Paul in North Yorkshire says, I think Donald's idea of a Riviera resort in Gaza is great. I thought about it myself a few months ago. I will model it on the 1950s French Côte d'Azur. No high-rise buildings. Hope Donald takes up my idea. I'm not really sure it's your idea, Paul, but, you know, you may well do. I think it's a great idea. I know it's not about ethnic cleansing at all, but that's another story. We're going to talk to Jack Elson right now. He's from the Sun, of course. This morning, the page 10 piece is all about the Chagos Islands from Leo McKinstry. Why are we taking winter fuel cash from old people while handing billions and these vital islands to Mauritius? There's a piece in the paper today saying, actually, one of the former military chiefs there at Diego Garcia says that there's a risk that planes might be blown up by the Chinese. Let's get a voice note from Kim.
Hi Mike, it's Kim from Somerset here. I'd like to talk about Keir Starmer's voice coach. I think we can all agree that this is a flagrant breach of COVID rules. However, what I really want to know is who's paying for his voice coach? Is this something that's being paid for out of taxpayers' money? Because if so, it makes me quite cross, really, because I don't think that this is, you know, how taxpayers want their money to be spent, especially given everything that comes out of Keir Starmer's mouth is lies. Thanks, Mike.
It's very true, Kim. Very good point. Well made. Well, the only man who's actually managed to put the question so far from the media to Keir Starmer about whether he broke any COVID rules is Jack Elson. He's here with us now, chief political correspondent from The Sun. Jack, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Yes, he wasn't very happy with me, was he?
He wasn't,
I
no.
wasn't going to go.
We were cheering you on here at Talk Towers. We thought, you know, now there's a proper journalist. He's actually asking the question, because nobody else was asking him. And he was very touchy when you said, you know, have any COVID rules been broken? Of course not. I mean, you know, a bit of a touchy reaction for a man who's meant to be cool under pressure.
Well, yes, and I wasn't going to go all the way to Brussels for three questions, not about this scandal which is blowing up, and to let Keir Starmer wriggle off the hook. To answer Kim's point just now, this was the exact question we put to the Prime Minister's press secretary yesterday, because there's two ways that when a party's in opposition, they raise money. One is through donations, and the other is what's known as short money, which is taxpayer money, and it's the level of detail which they can get into. So there is a likelihood that taxpayer funds were used to pay for this voice coach. It can obviously be donations on the other hand, but I guess that's almost sort of missing the point here, which is that and you know, like, I think a lot of people sort of are past COVID now. We sort of put it to the back of our minds, but you just know that if the shoe was on the other foot, this was the Tories doing this, Labour will be getting up on their high horse, as they did when they were in opposition, and demanding answers. And so I think that the public can expect the very same to be posed to Keir Starmer.
Yeah, also, I mean, you know, it hasn't escaped our notice, because there's always a clip when it comes to Keir Starmer of him talking about how during the Boris Johnson Partygate time, you know, if he was found to, he said, to have breached COVID laws, if he was given some kind of penalty notice, he would then resign. So I find it quite interesting that this morning we're reporting on the fact that the police are not interested in investigating because it was more than 3 years ago, and therefore it's past the statute of limitations for COVID offences. And why didn't they say that when they were asked about it on Monday? Because what they said on Monday was that, well, we're not investigating because nobody's complained about it, right? So why didn't they just say then, well, actually, there's no point in you asking us that question because the rules suggest that we wouldn't be able to investigate it because it's too long ago?
Yeah, it is a bit odd, and as Peter Hitchens pointed out before I came on, the police do have a habit of opening cold cases which stretch back far more than 3 years, and so it is quite bizarre whether or not they just think that, you know, there's no public appetite now or public interest for reopening of sort of old COVID wounds. Maybe that's their argument, but at the moment I don't think we've had a proper explanation and a timeline of events. And the problem is, and you know, you've been around the block long enough to know, is that the more you try to bury things, it's the drip, drip, drip of revelations, which ultimately is it's almost death by 1,000 cuts. Right. And so if there is anything more to hide, which comes out in the press in the weeks and months to follow, then maybe the Met Police will be forced to think again.
Yeah, right. Because we now are told by Keir Starmer, who originally said that it was a voice coach meeting, the voice coach had to teach him something that was urgent on Christmas Eve, even though she was in Brighton, even though everything else she'd done before had been on Zoom. She had to be in the same room as him. It now turns out that he's calling it a work event, that Rachel Reeves was out as well.
Yeah, totally. And it's one of the questions we posed yesterday. You know, the rules at the time said that if you cannot do your job from home, then and only then are you allowed to travel into work. And for this voice coach to previously boast about, well, not boast about, but she said that she could easily carry off her work from home and had done so. For her then to travel into work, and we've got obviously the notorious pictures now of that empty train, does seem a bit fishy.
Yeah.
And I think that it is incumbent on Keir Starmer, having propelled himself as this sort of the standard bearer of moral virtues when he was in opposition. It's one of the reasons he won the election, I think. I think it's incumbent on him to sort of lay out all the facts and explain exactly what happened. At the moment, they're being a bit cagey.
And because of the way that we saw his response to you, I mean, you get the very, very firm impression that, you know, it's kind of beneath him. You know, how dare you question my moral superiority and my absolute right to do exactly as I wish because I'm from the left wing and therefore I can only do good things.
Yeah, and if he'd stood up and I answered that question and laid out a clear timeline of what happened and put forward his defence, then it would be legitimate and it would be up to the public and the judge, one, whether they think that he broke lockdown rules, and then two, for any authorities to judge whether they want to open a case. But the fact that he just said all rules were followed and then sort of very hastily beat a retreat, it doesn't look good, and I think that you want openness to your politicians, especially from a politician who's preached transparency and integrity for many years now.
Well, I was watching the press conference in the White House yesterday, you know, that Carolina Leavitt, the new White House press secretary, and I thought to myself, and I put a tweet out to this effect, you know, how refreshing to see her confidently, you know, taking questions from all and sundry, batting them away, answering them, you know, giving information that previously wasn't known, you know, with such confidence. And I just thought to myself, if only we had that kind of level of transparency here. But, you know, and you'll know better than me, you're more likely to get, you know, bluster and diversion and, you know, we can't answer that, we can't comment on that, we don't really want to go there. You know, why can't we have what they have?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, especially now, especially in British politics, and in fact, you know, international politics really, although I think Trump is definitely the exception to the rule, is that politicians, when they go into a press conference, even though what looks like to be spontaneous responses, nothing is said which hasn't been premeditated and rehearsed. And so politicians are very adept at this now. They are, you know, drilled within an inch of their lives by media trainers, and nothing is said which they do not want to say. Now, there's obviously exceptions to that. Donald Trump is one. Nigel Farage is another. He shoots from the hip. Sometimes it gets him into trouble, but he does say what he thinks, and I think he thinks what he says. And so it is a problem. And to Keir Starmer's credit, you know, he does take a lot of questions when he's at home and sort of domestic press conferences. He always takes, you know, about a dozen. But it's these international trips where it's almost as if they don't want to be embarrassed by domestic issues on the world stage, and that's why they only take a few questions. But I think I was well within my rights to sort of have a bit of a shout.
Absolutely right. Let's have a quick word about Leo's piece today, Leo McKinstry's piece about the Chagos Islands. A lot of people saying these same things. You know, how is it possible for this government, on the one hand, to say we've got a £22 billion black hole, we've got no money, we've got to take winter fuel cash from old people, we've got to take inheritance tax from farmers, we've got to punish all manner of people in all sorts of different ways, council taxes going up, and yet here's 18 billion now, not 9 billion. They've suddenly magicked the number up to double what it was to give to Mauritius.
Something really weird is going on here because, you know, if it was just the fact that we were giving away our sovereign territory to a country, as Leo points out in his piece today in The Sun, which essentially has virtually no claim to it on the basis of an advisory ICJ judgment. You know, the International Court of Justice has been pretty sketchy at times anyway, over their record. If that was the end of it, that would be bad enough. But I think what people just cannot get their heads around is the fact that we are paying for the privilege of doing this, not just paying a measly sum, but paying through the nose. And so it was originally reported around a figure of about £9 billion over the 100-year deal. The Mauritian government then came out, gleefully, the Prime Minister, and said that this has been effectively doubled to a figure around 18, 19 billion pounds over that period. Downing Street denied that yesterday and said that there's been no change in the level of funding which we're going to be giving Mauritius. And I think actually Mauritius got a bit of a slap down and then rode back from that. But even about £9 billion over the course of 100 years to give away sovereign territory, as Leo points out, which they have essentially had no claim to, I think will really stick in the craw, and especially among pensioners, as is pointed out in the piece, as was pointed out by Nigel Farage at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday, that are having their winter fuel payments snatched from them. And like you said, it just does not add up when you have very quickly vanishing headroom. I think that £9.9 billion is going to be swallowed up by inflation. You have the prospect of more spending cuts, which are going to fall on the backs of Brits. To be giving Mauritius this amount of money just seems totally wrong and incomprehensible. And I would just add is that Downing Street's defence to all of this is that they say that this is essential for national security purposes, and that the base on Diego Garcia, which we share with the Americans, would not be able to continue as it does unless we signed away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Now, I understand that there are times where governments cannot comment on national security. However, people are just baffled about what could possibly be the case for this. If it's a case of some companies who are getting a bit squeamish about the ICJ ruling and not going to be supplying certain supplies to the base, then I think you need to then come out and say that, because at the moment the public are scratching their heads. And it's quite damaging to the government. Yeah, I think there's no question about that. Jack, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Jack Elson, Chief Political Correspondent at The Sun, with their page 10 this morning by Leah McKinstry, all about why the UK government is so keen to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius and pay them bucket loads of money into the bargain. Let's get Bill on Starmer.
Hi, Mike. Great show. Bill in Telford here. When Corbyn came to power, the MPs in Parliament voted to try and get rid of him and failed miserably. Starmer became leader and tried to get rid of Rayner and failed miserably. Truss gets into power and the Tories get rid of her within 6 weeks. Why can't we do the same with Starmer?
Well, it's a very good question. People will say that there are different rules in each party, and that's why it's not a mechanism of government, it's more a mechanism of the actual party policies themselves. But we'll talk more about that because we're running a bit late. 8:39, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:41. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Phil in Kent says, Mike, regarding Kieran, the voice coach drama, just because the police won't investigate, surely the most important thing is that the media put him to task and hold him to account for his hypocrisy. Well, we're trying. We are trying that, Phil. But you heard from Jack Elsom there. He asked one question and he always got this very tetchy answer. Of course not. I mean, really. Let's talk to Alex Wilson, former UK London, well, not former, I mean reform. I've just realised that reform and former are actually anagrams of each other. So if you're a former reform, you could put, anyway, never mind. London Assembly member Alex Wilson. Alex, very good morning to you. I don't know if I've suddenly
Morning.
become...
Very much present Reform UK.
Well, indeed, yeah. I don't know if I've suddenly become dyslexic
Former
overnight.
Conservative, but
I've just...
very much present Reform.
Yeah. No, I just read Reform as former. I don't know why. Anyway, listen, we got lots of important things to do, not much time to do them in. You had a big press conference yesterday talking about the local elections being cancelled. But let's talk a bit about the state of London and the violent crime epidemic we're having. Peter Hitchens earlier was saying, you know, it's not just about knives, it's about the people that are carrying them and how mad they are. But have a look at this. We've got some footage of a man who was stopped at London Bridge Station on Tuesday with a machete. And apparently that's now sort of not a surprising thing to see on the streets of London nowadays in broad daylight. It's not even at night necessarily. You know, what's going on?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying. I mean, we've spoken on the show many times about the knife crime epidemic we have in London. And what this incident has shown yet again that stop and search works as a technique, a tool that very useful tool in the police's arsenal for getting these weapons and drugs off the streets. Huge thanks and commendation to those officers involved, putting their lives at risk to make sure that weapons like this can be taken off the streets. It's the reason why we at Reform we want to increase the level of stop and search. Because we think it's one of the most valuable ways of getting these weapons off the streets. We've got a petition still running at the moment. www.saveourstreets.info. If people want to sign up to that, we're going to be presenting that to the Assembly in the next month or two. Want to get as much of a sort of voice behind that as possible, so we can encourage the Mayor and the Met to do more about this, because it's completely out of control. It's terrifying, and as you say, it's happening in broad daylight. It's not just in challenging areas in darkness. It's broad daylight. It's at tube stations. It's on buses. It's every day.
Exactly.
And we've got to make sure we do something about it.
And so stop and search clearly under those circumstances would work, wouldn't it? Because you'd obviously collect a lot more knives, you'd catch a lot more people, and maybe a lot more people would stop carrying them.
Absolutely. And that's why we completely back it 100%. And we back those officers who are doing that job day in, day out. They deserve our support and commendation. And the officers that you see in the clip there, huge thanks and well done to them for doing this operation on Tuesday.
Absolutely. Now, yesterday, as I say, Nigel Farage, your leader, spoke at a press conference about the cancelling of these elections. He called it the cowardice of the political class. It's 9 areas, isn't it, that are having their elections delayed as a result of this kind of what you might call restructuring, if you like, of some regions. But I mean, when they were standing for government, I don't remember them talking about doing this. I mean, I might have missed it somewhere in the manifesto, but was there any notion that this was going to happen until relatively recently?
There might have been a couple of sort of fairly vague lines in the Labour manifesto talking about increasing devolution, but nothing on the scale of what's been foisted upon these counties. And so there's 9 councils, mixture of counties and unitaries, that have had their request to cancel their elections accepted. There were a number of other councils that tried, and quite frankly, it's a disgrace. We live in a democracy. Part of being in a democracy is the ability to vote in our elected representatives, but also, crucially, vote them out. And the councillors that were elected, or the last time this set of councillors were elected was back in 2021. It was the height of Boris's kind of vaccine bounce. The political context has changed very dramatically since then, as we all know. And we think that even if the government and councils want to go ahead with these structural changes, we think these elections should be used as an opportunity for those people who want to carry on those negotiations to get the mandate to deliver the change they want. If you want to take on more powers, then you need to also be held to account for the way that you've exercised the powers you've already had. So in Essex, in Surrey, in Hampshire, Isle of Wight, and Sussex, these councillors are getting away with the ability to hide from their electorate, and that's outrageous. 5.5 million people are being denied their right to vote.
And I've been asking about this story for quite a while to try and figure out exactly what the new structures will look like, and I can't find anyone that can tell me, because I don't think they actually know. Because, I mean, I have a personal interest in Sussex. My kids live there and they go to school there and all of that. I'm not sure how it's all going to work. You know, it seems as if they're going to pile everything from 4 different sort of smaller council boroughs, if you like Eastbourne and Hastings and Rother and all of that, and they're going to fold that all into one big office somewhere in Brighton, which is also going to encompass West Sussex as well. And it's not that clear whether people are going to lose jobs, if there's going to be more people employed. Nobody knows.
Yeah, and they're going to be creating these new combined authority mayors, which will sit over these much, much larger areas. But within that, the districts will be abolished. There'll be collections of unitary authorities created. But as you say, at the moment, nobody's actually agreed what those plans are going to look like when they're delivered. A couple of years ago, there were some delays to, I think it was Somerset, North Yorkshire and Cumbria. But at the time, they knew exactly what the follow-up was going to be. It was all agreed. It was laid out in the statutes, and that's why those elections were delayed. But I don't think many of these plans will actually come to fruition. So all you'll end up doing is having a set of councillors extending their term without a democratic mandate. It's all right for them, but for the people that elect them and who want decisions to be made on things like potholes, social services, education, streetlights, waste recycling, all those really important issues that matter on a day-to-day basis, people in those areas are not going to have their voices heard. And it just seems very kind of coincidental, or perhaps not, that some of these areas that are being delayed are exactly the areas where Reform UK was poised to make a major breakthrough. Essex in particular, obviously we did very well in the general election, got 2 parliamentary seats there, and looking to make huge inroads into that county council. And it's not in the Labour government's interest for Reform to get a foothold, and it's certainly not in the interests of the Conservative leadership of those councils either. And that's why we think there's a bit of a kind of conspiracy of silence behind part of these delays. And you've seen our membership surging, our polling surging. We're absolutely poised to make a breakthrough in these elections, and it's it feels very rum that in some of those key areas, those voters are being denied the opportunity to vote for us. But what that does mean is in the other areas that are still going ahead, so in Lincolnshire, in Staffordshire, in Kent, in Lancashire, some of those other key areas for us, we're going to be absolutely doubling down our efforts, getting really strong candidates in place and making sure that in those areas we can make that breakthrough. Because ultimately, opinion polling is great and it's really encouraging to see how we're doing, but it's time that we started matching that with votes, real votes in real ballot boxes, and we can hold the balance of power in lots of these councils up and down the country and show what it really means to get Reform people elected. And that then creates that springboard for moving towards the next general election.
Sure. Alex, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Alex Wilson, Reform UK London Assembly member. Let's get a voice note from Darren on GB Energy.
Good morning, Mike. Darren from Carmarthen. Just wanted to let you know, Mike, I've actually been shopping around for a new electricity supplier. I've been looking on the comparison websites there, and I've just signed up this morning, Mike, to GB Energy. So they look like the best deal to me. So I've signed up to them, Mike, and they're sending some candles out this morning, apparently, and then next week they're going to be sending some A4 paper, Mike, so I can throw that on the fire. So things are looking good. Brilliant. Have a good day, Mike.
Darren in Carmarthen, tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Some of the quality of these voice notes is just fantastic. It's getting better as well. Coming up, Ash Regan's going to join us. She's MSP up in Scotland for Edinburgh Eastern, the Allapa Party. I'm going to ask her about GB Energy, based up in Aberdeen, of course. They say they're going to create 1,000 jobs. Maybe at some point. Jürgen is there with all the greatness that he can muster to try and tell us all about what's going on. And also Grangemouth shutting down, which wouldn't really be a very big help, would it, to actually producing fuel for this great nation. This is Morning Glory.
I'm a local councillor. I was in the health scrutiny panel, and I said, having been somebody with an experience in the health and social care background, I've seen firsthand what it's like for people with a genuine case of anxiety and depression. But I said that it's become too common now. People have thrown it around far too flippantly. We have children aged 8, 9, 10 years old going to teachers saying, "Miss, I'm depressed." And I know this because I speak to teachers firsthand. Children shouldn't know what depression is. They should be out playing with their friends, enjoying life.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:53. The sun is up and it's very, very bright out there now. So I don't know. I've just got a feeling spring is in the air, which means the good news for those of you who can't afford to put your heating on, maybe you won't need to for soon. It won't be quite so cold as it has been. Of course, you're up in Scotland. That may not occur and may not apply. Ash Regan is here with us, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern with the Allowance Party. Ash, very good morning to you.
Good morning from the Scottish Parliament.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We've been talking about GB Energy this week because Jürgen Meyer gave his first interview to Sky up there in Aberdeen, and I must say it struck me as a slightly odd interview. First of all, and second of all, I keep asking people what GB Energy is doing and what it's for. I mean, do you have a clue as to whether or not they've even got an operation yet going?
Well, this was, of course, all part of Starmer and UK Labour's big pitch to Scotland, you know, that the Labour Party actually care about Scotland, or an attempt to say that they did care about Scotland. So they suggested that we would have this GB Energy, it would be based in Scotland, there'd be loads of jobs associated with it. And now we find out that the person in charge of it, of course, doesn't live in Scotland and doesn't come to Scotland very often at all. There is possibly going to be a nameplate in Aberdeen, but I don't think that's going to pay many people's mortgages by way of jobs. Right. And the promised jobs, we think, could take decades. I would say anything that you're suggesting that's going to take decades is probably not going to happen. No. Of course, Scotland is an energy-rich nation. You know, we're producing a lot of energy for the rest of the UK. And really, we should have an energy strategy. I mean, I think the Scottish Government, to be honest, should have a better energy strategy than they do. And Scotland is in a position, really, where I feel the energy resources are being exploited.
Right. Well, when I saw Rachel Reeves being interviewed on Laura Kunsberg's show a couple of weeks ago, she was talking about, you know, wanting the third runway at Heathrow before they actually announced it. And she was then talking about biofuels that are going to be used, so planes would be much greener and all of that. And when Laura Kunsberg said to her, well, the only place in Britain you could make that biofuel is Grangemouth, which also happens to be in Scotland, but why are you shutting it? She didn't really have an answer.
So there's a big new market now for sustainable aviation fuel, as you've correctly mentioned there, and that's one of the options for something that could be happening in Grangemouth if we could get the right environment set up. So the Scottish Government talking to the UK Government and investors and so on, then that's something that could be created to save the site. You know, Scotland is a top 25 global oil producing nation. So to get into a situation where it doesn't have an oil refinery in the country, you know, obviously I think there's 5 or 6 if you count England and Wales, but the 90% of that oil and gas is being produced in Scotland. So we need a way forward for this. I think it's a strategic national asset. You know, it could be producing sustainable aviation fuel, which is something that could be a growing product for the future. I think it's very important. The Scottish Government are showing that, you know, to be honest, they basically shrugged their shoulders about this as if they didn't have.
And there's a lot of mixed messages going on because we've also now got Keir Starmer talking about possibly...
Her role in Grangemouth. And yet, under our previous First Minister, Alex Salmond, saved twice.
Right. Sorry, we're just losing your signal there slightly, Ash. You know, what I was going to say was there seems to be a lot of mixed signals as well. Keir Starmer's now coming out, having seen that court case in Scotland, refusing the Rosebank operation to go ahead. He's now talking about reopening it.
Well, I think there's a good argument for saying that. You know, in the Alba Party, we are very pro oil and gas. You know, it's a Scottish resource. It employs thousands of people across Scotland, not just in oil and gas, but also in the supply chain. It's not an industry that we want to see wound down. Especially, I know environmental campaigners will say, oh, well, we need to be moving away from oil and gas. But if we don't produce it in Scotland, but we're still using it, what's going to happen then? Of course, what is going to happen is we're going to be importing it from other countries, which has a much higher environmental footprint. But meanwhile, we lose all the jobs for Scotland. So I don't think that's acceptable. I think we need to be maintaining the industry in Scotland to keep these jobs up here.
Yeah, no, I think everybody who wants to have, reasonably good energy security wants that as well, because it makes no sense at all, apart from to Ed Miliband, who seems to be getting more and more crazy as the weeks go on, to stop using the great natural resources of our great country.
Absolutely. That is exactly what we should be doing. We should modernise. So we have, obviously, the Grangemouth Refinery. I believe that could be modernised and take it into the future so it would be profitable. And we could be refining our own oil in Scotland, creating these new products that are, potentially for the markets of the future, and keeping the jobs in Scotland. You know, surely that is a win-win for everyone.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? You know, there's not much common sense down here in Westminster. I'm not sure whether there's any more up there. But listen, Ash, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you. Ash Regan, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern from the Alba Party. Of course, there's Scottish elections coming up next year. A couple of mentions for you here. Adrian in East Sussex says, Starmer didn't answer that excellent question from the Conservative MP. If he lies in the House, he could be removed from office. Well, we've got that Conservative MP coming up in a little while as well, so we'll talk about that. John says, could Starmer sell the Chagos Islands to Trump for £22 billion? Trump would be happy and Starmer could stick the money up his black hole. Well, John, thank you very much for that. Richard says, the Grenfell story, in which Angela Rayner seems to have got herself into a bit of trouble because she apparently wants to knock the Grenfell Tower down, is a dead cat strategy to deflect the mainstream media from the voice coach story. Well, to be honest, Richard, the mainstream media are not covering the voice coach story. It's only really us, and we are part of the mainstream media, of course, who are covering it properly. If you tried to watch the BBC or Sky, you would think it wasn't even happening. But the story is not over. It's still got some way to go. Coming up, Esther McVeigh is going to join us. As I say, we'll be talking more about the voice coach. This is Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport.
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. Coming up to the last hour of the show. We've got plenty going on though. Esther McVeigh's going to join us, Conservative MP of course, former Minister for Common Sense, very welcome on this show, which is of course the world headquarters of Common Sense. Over in America they've got plenty of it as well. They've got a new White House Press Secretary, Carolina Leavitt, who is absolutely smashing it over there. She's unbelievably good. She just gets up and bats away questions, talks to people in a very straightforward and equal way, doesn't have any problem giving away government information, unlike a contrast with this place where you basically get Keir Starmer storming off a stage in Brussels because somebody dares to ask him a question about whether he might have broken any COVID rules. Of course not. He growled at Jack Elson from The Sun, and he's never really answered any questions since. But we're still asking those questions because it turns out that now the event at which the voice coach from Brighton appeared was not in fact a voice coach lesson. It was some kind of work event where they were preparing to answer a question on Brexit on Christmas Eve. In the evening, the 24th of December, in the middle of a Tier 4 lockdown. Pull the other one, Sir Keir Starmer. Do I look like an idiot? Don't answer that. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Front pages today very much associated with the migrant story. Front page of the Mail has got Kemi Badenoch calling for a ban on migrants who claim benefits so they cannot become UK citizens. Also, front page of the Times has got a story that says efficiency savings are needed to be found within the civil service. Otherwise, people might be fired. If you believe that, I've got some swampland in Florida for you to take care of. 0344 499 1000. Also, we will talk some more about the other story on the front pages, which is you may be suffering from Zoom fatigue. If you've been doing it for too long, let's face it, it wasn't something we even knew about sort of 5 or 6 years ago. It was something invented during COVID, during the idea that nobody could go anywhere. Suddenly everybody was on Zoom. I don't think it's a bad thing, but we'll also talk as well about the failings in the papers this morning. Failed by the state. 6 people who died as a result of failings by the state. The victims of the Nottingham killer and also those 3 tiny victims, those little girls, victims of the Southport killer, both of which events could have been prevented if only we did the right thing. If only the NHS had looked after Valdo Calacane and made sure that his dangerous nature was picked up long before it was. And if only the Southport killer, who I don't like to name so I'm not going to, had been prevented by Prevent from doing those awful things, we wouldn't be talking about it at all. 0344 499 1000. Other news is Keir Starmer's not actually going to an international conference next week in Paris, extraordinarily. We'll tell you why. Coming up after this is Morning Glory.
Ah, Angela, that's a nice dress. Where did you get it? Oh, I don't know. It was a note. Do you like it?
That was an earlier note from Gus, who's a very talented mimic, it seems to be said, because we've now found out, right, that Keir Starmer, who continually sort of dodges bullets, I mean, he's basically a guy who seems to be a bit accident-prone. I don't think I've ever known a Prime Minister to be so hapless at avoiding one scandal after another. You know, every single week we come in to do this job here at Morning Glory in the home of Common Sense, and every single week I'm thinking, I wonder what week this will be for Keir Starmer. I wonder how he'll manage to sort of try and bring back his reputation, try and improve his popularity rating, and then he gets further down into another mire, another problem, and this week it's been all about the voice coach. It was occurring to me the other day, somebody said he's not going away to do this next AI conference in Paris because, in fact, if you remember back to the 1970s, there used to be some of those dodgy African republics where the leaders never left the country for fear that there would be a military coup while they were away. And I do wonder whether Keir Starmer doesn't want to leave Downing Street in case when he comes back somebody's changed the locks. and he's not in charge anymore. Let's talk to Esther McVey, former Minister for Common Sense. She might agree with me. Esther, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I mean, it's a very bizarre thing, this Prime Minister that we've got, isn't it? I mean, I can't understand how he's so almost deliberately just doesn't get it. He seems to move from one crisis to another. And as I say, just when you think he's going to do something worthwhile, he kind of takes the wrong decision again. And he's been very grumpy about this whole voice coach thing ever since the beginning of it when it came out at the weekend.
Well, I think it's that moral superiority he had, that he would be telling people they couldn't do this, and he was going to be really like the moral police.
Yeah.
He was going to be whiter than white. And I think this is the hypocrisy now that he will get, which will probably see him off in a way. So this two-tier Kia, whether people were talking about that on the police, and they're now going to talk about that about him. So let's get back to this voice coach.
Yeah.
So the police can't look into it, so they say, because it's past the 3-year limit to look into it. But there will be political probing, whether it's by his opponent or why it's by the public. Because the question everybody wants to know, how did a voice coach become an essential worker? And how was it she had to come in person on Christmas Eve to give him those voice coaching? And the public want to know that. And I bet you, at home, his wife is saying, why did she need to come to the home to do this, break lockdown rules for voice coaching? And as I said, I think it's a sheer hypocrisy that he went on and on and on about Boris having a piece of cake at a birthday, etc., when look at what he was doing, flouting the rules. Or what he did is change her status to essential worker. Why was a voice coach an essential worker?
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, it's almost as though they've kind of conceded that she's not. But they yet haven't kind of admitted guilt, as it were. You know, they've now sort of changed their tune from going very hard on the fact that she was an essential worker to now saying, oh, well, it was a work event. Rachel Reeves was there. I mean, in Prime Minister's questions yesterday, you know, he talked about working into the night when Tories were partying into the night and tried to make a contrast between, you know, them being profligate with the nation's money and the nation's booze. And yet here he was, you know, burning the midnight oil, working hard into the night. I mean, nobody's buying that, are they?
No, I think you're right. Nobody's buying it. That's why he must know it's difficult to answer any questions. Hence, he's not answering questions. People just want to know, well, what was the reason? How did it happen? Well, it seems to me he can't answer that. It has a bad whiff about it.
Does.
And when things have a bad whiff about it, people go after it, don't they?
Well, they do, because, you know, there's nothing worse than a politician who tries to dodge the issue. You know, you've been doing this business for a long time, as I have. You know, the one thing that you can't do, particularly if you're the Prime Minister, particularly if you're in a position of some authority, you can't just assume it's all going to go away, which seems to be a strategy on pretty much everything. And I tell you what, I was watching him in Prime Minister's questions yesterday, and those two women sitting on either side of him, Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves, I've never seen two women looking less happy to be there, because they were just looking grim. They looked as if they didn't want to listen to anything he said. And I smell kind of, you know, blood in the water, if you like, inside of the Labour government. There's both of them sitting there thinking, I could do his job.
Well, they might be, but they've got their own problems, haven't they? I mean, I look at them and they don't really want to be there. It's not just his questions. When you sit on that front bench, you know, all the cameras are sort of aimed at you, and it's possibly a moment to reflect on your own briefs. And Rachel Reeves must be thinking, I'm lucky to be here as well. That budget has been a disaster. It doesn't matter who you ask, business people, farmers, pensioners, students, disaster. And then, you know, Angela Rayner, well, what is she doing? She's never going to have all those houses built. She's now stopping elections, certain parts of the country. She has got her own dilemmas. So I think it is, we're looking at the front bench crumbling. It was so easy to throw stones in opposition, and actually they haven't got a clue when it comes to governing. And you said, and it made me smile, is Starmer frightened to go out the country because he might come back and find that the locks have been changed? No, actually something very sinister is happening in Parliament at the moment. Nobody's here. He's making sure no Labour MPs are here, because if they're in the House, they will plot, they will plan, they will look to remove him. And at the moment, business is crumbling of a Monday night, a Tuesday night, a Wednesday, Thursday. People aren't here. He is sending them home.
Wow.
So they can't plot against him.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? And I mean, are you surprised, as I am actually, at how quickly the skids are under this guy? You know, because I think we all, I mean, I was prepared for a government that might not be to my taste. I was prepared to see them resetting some of the things that the Tories had done over the course of the last 14 years. But I wasn't prepared quite for such incompetence and some quite ludicrous arrogance from this lot, who don't seem to care what the public thinks of them.
You are right. And actually, in the corridors in Parliament, some of the, we'll call them veteran Labour MPs, are saying the same thing. They cannot believe they weren't prepared for government. They cannot believe they haven't put processes in place. They simply think you can say a word and it will happen. And I look at them and I see they're out of ideas. I look at them and think they don't know what they're doing, out of their depth. And I also think they've run out of energy. They're a busted flush within 6 months. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And what are you making of Kemi so far? She's got a name on the front pages this morning with this idea of a new sort of immigration policy. I mean, I said earlier, and I don't mind admitting it, you know, well, you know, you guys were in power for 14 years when you could have done something. Is anybody going to really buy this new idea of hers that she wants to make it more difficult for people to become UK citizens? It's a bit after the Lord Mayor's show, isn't it?
So first of all, I welcome what Kemi said here. And Kemi does know, and I think she's been very honest about it, our failing has been the immigration numbers. So she has got to now put in place, what can we do? How is it, you know, people are going to believe that we're going to get it right this time? And what are we going to do sort of step by step? So not, as I say, throwing stones, but look at that process. Now, I am much tougher on this issue, and I always have. I mean, I don't want these people in the country. I think you've got a point-based system. That's what we want. And you only want people in this country. Well, people talk about the brightest and the best. I mean, I'd be putting a moratorium on immigration figures, so nobody would be coming in yet until we got a grip of what is going on and get rid of people out of the country. So I think, you know, Kemi is right now to put forward these plans. I think she's right in saying, look, to have a British passport, to be a British citizen is a privilege, and people need to understand this. We're not just a place you stop off, claim benefit and have a cushy life. You need to now be prepared to put your shoulder to the wheel and be proud of being British.
Yeah, but what about the fact that this is just a very easy country to sort of just get into and stay in? I mean, that's really the bottom line here, that, you know, the processes by which we're supposed to be stopping people coming in don't work. The processes by which we're supposed to be exporting people, deporting people, aren't working terribly well. I mean, we've got a story today that we've done ourselves. £11.6 million as an exclusive on Talk has been spent on deporting 13,500 people in the last 6 months since Keir Starmer's been in. You know, it's a very small number of people at the end of the day, and I'm not saying it was any better under the Tories, it wasn't, but the system seems to be broken. It seems to me that people don't really care about the rules, they don't really care about the authorities. They think that if they can get their feet into the under the table in Britain, they'll never leave.
Well, we need to make sure now that the message goes out far and wide and loud. That isn't the case. I think for too many years, people have possibly been squeamish about talking about immigration, immigration levels, how much it costs the country, integration, cultural differences, and people haven't really talked about it. They are now. Now, in my world, I'm a born optimist. It's never too late, but we do have to take a very firm line. And I know it's expensive to remove people, so a look at that cost. It is going to be expensive getting people out of the country. That's why you're right. We don't want them here in the first place. But I think what you'll see with, and for me, you know, I don't mind the cost of getting them out of the country. I do mind the cost of them being in the country. And I think the biggest disaster that Labour did was stopping the third country that was Rwanda. You need a reason why people can't come here, and you also a deterrent, and then you also need somewhere that you can send people when they have destroyed the documentation. I also think the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak in particular, had done all the hard yards. He'd had the battles, he'd had the arguments, he'd got it through, he'd won over the narrative. So to Labour to chuck it after the hard work was done. I have to say, what a bunch of idiots now that you see other countries are looking to emulate that. But like I said, we've done all the hard work, and they, I don't know, left-wing sort of politically correct posturing got rid of it.
Yeah. One final one for you, Esther. We've got a piece of the Times today saying that civil service mandarins risk losing their jobs unless they find ways to save money. That sounds to me like something that will never happen. I mean, these guys are harder to remove than mollusks from a rock, aren't they?
Look, this is talking tough, and it will go nowhere, absolutely. I smiled when I read it because all of the things I put in place, the guidance I put in place to save money on EDI training, staff that you didn't need there, all of that, they're now stopping and reversing. So really, they would have had those savings if they kept the changes I brought in 6 weeks ago. So this is all talk, it'll be no action.
Yeah. That's pretty much their new slogan, isn't it? All talk, no action. It's a good one, that.
Yeah.
I'll write that down. I'll give it to Starmer later on. Thank you very much indeed. Esther McVey, former Minister for Common Sense, a thing that we have a great deal of here in this building, in this studio, but not a thing that they have much of in Downing Street. Let's get a voice note from Jen.
My name's Jen. I'm an ex-police officer, and it gets right on my carrot when people refer to shoplifting as that term. It's actually a lot of these gangs now that are going into shops and stealing. It's burglary, not shoplifting. It's theft at the very least. But if you're going into a shop intending to steal, which is what a lot of these gangs are doing, then it's actually burglary.
I agree with you, Jen. I think you're absolutely right. It's important that we don't put it down as some kind of, minor, low-level crime. It's absolutely damaging the fabric of the nation, and it's putting a lot of people's businesses in jeopardy. This from Peter in Suffolk. Morning, Mike. Does this 3-year rule only apply to politicians? The police often go back 50 years or more to convict people. Yeah, they do. And Colette says, Mike, this is the guy who knocks off work after 5 p.m. on a Friday, but apparently was doing voice coaching on Christmas Eve. Get out of it. It's very true. I mean, it don't make any sense to me, does it? There's no way. It's not believable. It's not credible, as we would say. Coming up, we're going to speak to another Conservative MP, Gagan Mohindra. He's the one that asked a question of Keir Starmer in Parliament yesterday about the voice coach.
It is dreadful, but actually the first thing we should say is that this person must be the worst voice coach in the world, because I think his voice might have actually got worse under her tuition. Who knows? Maybe they were practicing behind masks in order to maintain the rules and regulations. I'm not sure, but it does seem rather convenient, doesn't it? that when Free Gear Keir gets caught out, and he has been caught out royally, it's amazing it's taken so long.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 22 minutes past 9. We are with you until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along just before that to tell us what's coming up on her show. Gary in Rutland says, morning, Mike. If ever we needed a new series of Spitting Image, it's now. They can just alter the old John Major puppet. P.S. The robot and Rayner want to kill off the UK. Mike says this, I believe Starmer could not provide the receipts for his voice coach, which is why it has been changed to a working meeting. I detest this government. And then he says all the best. And Graham says, there is a clear pattern to Starmer. Scandal, story breaks, denied, story massage, story admitted, but with caveats, new scandal takes over. Pretty much right. Gagan Mahindra's here with us. He's the Conservative MP for South West Hertfordshire, who asked a question in Parliament yesterday of Keir Starmer about this whole business. Let's get a voice note first, though, from Pete.
Great show as ever, mate. R2-tier Kia, he's got more faces than a watch shop. It's just a shame as a country we can't do nothing about it, mate. I feel a bit guilty voting for reform because I've basically put this shower in power, haven't I? Anyway, take care, mate. Bye.
I mean, I think the Tories were always going to be knocked out of power in any event, but let's speak to Gagan Mahindra, a Tory MP for South West Hertfordshire. Gagan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks so much for joining us. Let's just play out your question yesterday and Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister's reaction to it.
I know that, like everyone in the House, the Prime Minister is an honourable member. On that basis, can you repeat his assurances that all rules were followed while the country was in Tier 4 lockdown in December 2020, not just by him, but as his team as well, but also his voice coach, Leona Mellinger?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, in December 2020, I was in my office working on the expected Brexit deal. With my team, we had to analyse the deal as it came in at speed, prepare and deliver a live statement at speed on one of the most important issues for our country in recent years. That's what I was doing. What were they doing? Suitcases of booze into Downing Street, partying and fighting, vomiting up the walls, leaving the cleaners to remove red wine stains. That's the difference. I was working, they were partying.
I mean, I don't know if you can remember what you were doing on Christmas Eve, Gagan, back in 2020, but I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have been organising a works event anywhere near work. I was pretty sure that I was working in this office here. I don't think I did a show on Christmas Eve, but I used to come into this studio on my own, just my producer and I. We were allowed to travel in. We didn't go on the tube because it was not safe. We decided to come in on a car. I used to bring her in every morning and take her home. There was nobody else here apart from the essential staff that ran the show. There was nobody in the whole building. You know, people were not travelling, as we saw from the voice coach's picture on the train. I mean, did you expect him to launch into that kind of rant about the Tories?
So, Mike, I think I was a bit disappointed with his answer because it was typical deflection.
Yeah.
I thought it was a perfectly reasonable question. London and the South East were in Tier 4. His speech coach was apparently in Tier 3. As you can see from the picture on the screen, she was on an empty train.
Yeah.
The rules at the time were very much work from home unless you cannot, and the vote coach has actually been out in public confirming that she can do remote training.
Yeah.
So I'm still a bit confused about the necessity for her to physically be in Downing Street on Christmas Eve.
Right. And I guess we can take from his diversionary answer that the answer to the question actually is no. Because he can't guarantee that no COVID rules were broken, because it would appear, and even some people inside of Labour are saying it, that he did break the rules.
Well, Mike, I think this is the critical point. Sir Keir makes a lot of ground off the back of being a lawyer. He would have known full well the rules. Whether he broke the rules at the time is not really the issue. It's whether he encouraged others to do so. No one likes hypocrisy. And I think it's fair and reasonable to ask for an independent investigator to actually look at the facts and figure out what actually happened.
Right. Well, my question as well is that when this originally came up, because it was revealed at the weekend in a book called Get In, which is a great book, by the way, for fascinating insight into the madness of what is going on inside the Labour Party. But when the police were approached initially about whether or not they were investigating, they said, no, we're not investigating because nobody's complained. So then somebody complained, obviously, as you would expect. They then say, well, we're not investigating now because it turns out that there's a statute of limitations on these events and you know, crimes that may have been committed during COVID. And so it's because it's more than 3 years ago, we're not doing it. Why wouldn't they have said that initially when they were asked, rather than saying, oh, nobody's complained?
So, Mike, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the police. I think there are other ways to investigate this. It's perfectly reasonable to ask for an independent investigator to confirm that the Prime Minister followed all the rules at the time. I'm still a bit miffed about why his official spokesman cannot give that assurance. I'll leave it up to great journalists like yourself to continue to query what is the actual truth on this matter. Is there any jurisdiction in this, do you think, for the Parliamentary Standards Committee? Is there anything there that that might be looked into from the point of view of whether he's misled Parliament or whether in any way he's been in breach of some kind of parliamentary code? So that was part of the reason for my question yesterday at PMQs. Sir Keir will know full well that we have to be fully honest and transparent when we're in the chamber. Yeah. Part of the reason he may have chosen to deflect was that he was possibly uncomfortable giving me the reassurance that he had said previously. Because that's the other thing. If he would have been sure as a lawyer that it was too long ago for anybody in the police to investigate it, why would he be so evasive? My question obviously is slightly loaded, because my suggestion to you is that they didn't realise that there was a statute of limitations until they made it up. Mike, I will leave it up to your audience to assess whether they think the Prime Minister being fully transparent. He obviously was consistently saying that he wants to have public confidence in his premiership. I think the longer this continues, that the more the public have a right to start querying. I think there are further questions that need answering, and I look forward to eventually getting to the truth of what actually happened. Are you disappointed that Kemi Badenoch, your party leader, didn't go for the jugular with him on this, because she kind of let him off the hook a little bit? No, so I'm the deputy chief whip for the Conservatives, so I can assure you that Kemi knew exactly what she was doing. She gave me the freedom to pursue this line of questioning. OK, understood. So what's your next move then, Gagan? Are you going to wait and see, or are you going to try and ask a few more questions of other people? What about Rachel Reeves? I mean, Rachel Reeves was apparently there as well, we're now told. Yeah, so Mike, I was going to bring that up actually, because there's further media reports that suggest that her family went down with COVID about 5 days after that meeting, which ties in with the infection timetables. I'm working closely with my good friend Richard Holden, who's been pursuing this matter already. I was lucky enough to be on the ballot for PMQs yesterday, so hence why it's appropriate for me to ask a question. I think there is answers that need to be forthcoming, and I can assure you that we'll continue to pursue this. Yeah, and if I remember rightly, Keir Starmer and his family got COVID quite a lot, because I seem to remember that he was quite often absent because he had COVID. And I remember commenting at the time, he seems to be very susceptible to getting COVID. Maybe he was just very susceptible to not following any of the rules. I'm not going to go down that pathway, Mike. I will let others come up with scenarios that may or may not be the truth. Very good. OK, well, great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the show. Gagan Mahindra there. You see, I remember that quite well. I do remember sort of making fun of the Prime Minister, because those of us who were pretty sure that most of these restrictions were a crock, if you like, and that most people who got COVID were going to actually recover and not have a terribly bad time. And I'm obviously giving you the caveat there that, yes, it did affect some people, and some people did suffer very badly, and many people did die. Yes, all of that. But Keir Starmer got COVID, to my knowledge, I think at least 3 or 4 times during that period where we were sort of locking down. Now, he might just be unlucky, Maybe he's just susceptible to respiratory diseases. Or
maybe he just wasn't bothering to do anything that everybody else was doing, and maybe he was mingling with more people than he should have done. Voice coaches, you know. She, of course, old Rachel Reeves at the time was not Chancellor of the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer either. That would have been Annalise Dodds. So if they were talking about the big business of Brexit and how to answer the question, surely he would have wanted his Shadow Chancellor there, wouldn't he? I wonder if Tulip Siddiq was there, or that woman from Bangladesh, you know, the corrupt one. Who else was there? You know, unbelievable, isn't it? We'll come back to this because clearly the story is not over yet. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Good morning, Mike. It's Chris in Ottershaw here. Esther McVeigh just said that Kemi Badenoch is working on getting the immigration issue right this time. Hang on a minute. You've had 4 goes at getting it right this time.
I think that's fair. At least 4, Chris, to my knowledge, because, I mean, if you think about all the numbers of different members of the Home Office they had, how many Home Secretaries did they have? I think it was probably more than 4, wasn't it? Stuart says, Mike, Keir is able to keep dodging bullets because Badenoch is only firing blanks. True. Chris says, morning, Mike. Like Esther McVeigh, I like Esther McVeigh. She's a good MP. Should be with reform. No illegal or asylum seekers should ever be given UK citizenship, just a visa, so we can get rid of any potential criminals or those working in the black market. I think that's probably right. Paul in Fife says, on Lucy Letby, how does Peter Hitchens and others explain the letters that she wrote to grieving parents? It's a good question. I can't explain it. All I know, and like Peter Hitchens, is that I think there's been enough doubt cast now on some of the evidence that was presented as to at least, very least, have another trial. No? Disagree with me if you wish. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, Hugh Andre is going to be here. He's going to talk about the government. Guess what? They've found a new way to tax people. Death in service payouts. They're going to start taxing those. To members of the military. Also, we're going to be joined by Joanna Marchong from the Taxpayers Alliance. There's a problem with the bins. I kid you not, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:35. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until at 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brill will be here when you see her. Just before that, Morning Mike says, Nikki, could you see Starmer the Harmer doing what Donald Trump has done with banning trans women from women's sports? Not just that, but sitting down with a crowd of girls and being so personal with them and handing out pens like that. No, the answer is a big fat no, says Nick in Kent. Absolutely right. I mean, he just doesn't have it, does he? Hasn't got it at all. Anyway, delighted to say we've got Joanna Marchand here in the studio. Joanna, nice to see you. From the Taxpayers Alliance. We're going to talk about bins, right? Because bins are forever the bane of people's lives, and we talk about them a lot on this show, and we're going to talk about it some more. Let's get Darren first on, the voice coach.
Mike, Darren from Suffolk, great show as ever. So this party that Sakir had on Christmas Eve, you know, in the evening, the party, sorry, the work event. So the party they had in the evening. So what I think she did is she came all the way from Brighton because she's been teaching them how to lie over the first 6 months, all of them. So that's the reason why they were all there, because she had to teach them how to lie, you know, not a penny more on council tax. We will freeze winter fuel by raising a windfall tax. 30 plus lies already. They are just blatant liars.
They really are just blatant lies, it has to be said. Joanna, we were talking about councils earlier about how the government has decided in its wisdom to cancel a load of elections at local council level. I think 9 local council sort of general areas are not bothering to have them. This is all about bins and how they're going to change the way that people's bins are collected. Something like 42 councils in the UK, more than 1 in 10, are going to change the way they collect waste. Why?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, why is a very good question. It's obviously they're going a bit bankrupt. They've crunched numbers of some sort and realised that it's not actually covering the amount to do the runs. So they want to do the bin run, less frequently.
Right. So they want to work less, in other words.
Yeah. Well, you're paying more money in council tax. They're apparently broke, and these are the cuts that they're making.
Because some council tax is going up by as much as 10%, isn't it? And so you're going to get less for it, in other words.
Exactly, yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, because if I'm right in saying this, most councils outsource their bin collection, don't they? They give it to, you know, these companies like Veolia or something like that, who you'd never pronounce their name. And you never quite know when they're coming or what they're doing or which bits they're collecting. I mean, the whole business of recycling seems to have sort of fallen by the wayside in some places, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of, 1, they are infrequent. 2, you never know when they're coming. 3, it's just entirely, like, it's one of these issues that are always so annoying to every single person.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you are. Not only, even if you're living in a flat building where you don't really have to do your recycling and it's all one big skip, you will still see the consequences of these bin changes because there'll be fly tipping, there'll be rubbish when you walk. You see it in certain parts of London. Lambeth is notoriously bad for it, where you see rubbish everywhere because they're just not doing what the primary thing that they should be doing. You think about council tax, you think about what council should do. Bins are like one of the first things you think of.
Right. And also it's just kind of health measure, isn't it? Particularly when it gets to the summer. I mean, it's hard to imagine what it's going to be like when it's cold in the winter. But in the summertime, you know, you want the bins collected properly, quickly. You don't want rats running around, foxes running around. I mean, it's pretty awful out there. The streets are pretty dirty anyway. And one of my pet bugbears is that they don't empty the public bins, you know, the things that sit on our streets. They're always overflowing, they're rammed with... Who's supposed to empty those? Those are local councils as well, aren't they?
Yeah, no, they are. So it's just another aspect. They clearly don't have any aspect of this under control. Right. And just the mere thought of Bristol Council going from fortnightly to monthly black bin collections caused outrage. And when I looked into it, having seen 42 other councils in the UK considering the same move, it's like, well, they're really not listening to anyone here. They're not listening to public consensus. One of these councils, they not only are they picking up waste less frequently, they're also decreasing the size of the bin itself.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Well, so if you've got a big wheelie bin now, and you're only going to get emptied once a month, they're going to give you a smaller bin.
Exactly. It was going from 240 litres to 180,
Right. And what happens to the big bins then if they take them away?
No, exactly. Where are you supposed to put it if not try to find it somewhere else?
But again, is this not also the dead hand of the old Green Brigade who are trying to make out that we throw too much away? So here's what we need to do, is to say to people, right, we're not going to collect as much rubbish from you, so you just have to do something else with it. What are you supposed to do? Like bury it in the garden? I mean, if you happen to have a garden.
I guess that would be environmentally friendly.
Right. Well, people will just do things. I mean, like, go down to Sussex. I mean, you just start burning stuff. People will just start burning it and incinerating rubbish, which is not really very good for the environment.
I know my parents living where they do, they're having this issue themselves. And it's like, no matter how conscious you're being and you're trying to sort it out, it's still going to be really annoying. Like, we just start putting it places. Like you do when you go to a restaurant, you're like emptying your bins at that restaurant. It's ridiculous.
Exactly right. People start putting it in the car and driving off to some service stop somewhere and dumping it.
It sounds silly, but people actually do it. Like good people actually do this because it's so ridiculous.
Well, they will. I mean, I know people. You know, certainly down in Sussex, there's a town dump. Because a lot of people will simply just take their rubbish there. They put it into black bags, pretend it's something else, and just throw it into the sort of household waste, which has got a great big tip. And so that's going to happen a lot more, isn't it?
Yeah, and councils will have to pay for it. So they're cutting costs in something so basic to then make up for it in, I don't know, like pest control in the summer when there'll be a rodent issue.
Yes.
Or even fixing the fly tipping. I mean, you're just going to... It makes no sense whatsoever.
It is one of the most stupid things that they can ever do. And also, God forbid you ever miss one of their collections. Because if you live in a rural part of the country particularly, and they only come, say at the moment, once every fortnight, and if you miss it, then you're stuck with a load of rubbish, literally, for a month.
And there's also like loads of strict rules and regulations in terms of if it's a millimetre above or the lid's not closing, they won't do it. Yeah, they have.
They've fined people for not recycling the right things, but all the rules are different depending on where you live.
Yeah.
You know, in London, for example, you can live in a place where you don't recycle anything, or you can live in a place where you recycle everything together, or some people want you to recycle the food. And the bottles, and it's just ridiculous.
It's really too complicated.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think it's a metaphor for how useless this country has become. We can't even organise the rubbish collection properly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's absolutely embarrassing. Well, good to see you, Joanna. Thank you very much indeed, Joanna Marchong. Thankfully, the Taxpayers Allowance keeps an eye on these things because you've got to watch out. So we'll probably do some calls on this actually, maybe not now, but one day soon, on what exactly is going wrong with all the rubbish in this country, and why can't they get it right? Unbelievable. This, of course, is Talk. This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:46. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, which is actually only about 10 minutes away. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here to tell us what's coming up on her show, of course. Carl, here from up north, says, councils should not be cutting bin collections, they should be cutting their bonuses. Well, they should also be cutting the number of people they've got working, pushing pens around and pushing pieces of paper around in the office, or not even in the office, sometimes working from home. What they don't need to do is cut back on bin collection. Reg says this, well, at least if they don't collect the bins, we'll have fuel to burn on the fire. You don't want to burn your rubbish inside the house, mind you, or indeed outside. How about this from Margaret? It says, Mike, Esther said 2 tiers sends MPs home. Why? It's like the school bell goes off, so off you go. Yeah, I don't know. Don't get that. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. Mike from Bolton here. I just wanted to get your thoughts on Kemi Badenoch in PMQs yesterday. I thought she could have made a 2-tier squirm a bit more than she did. I think she's really weak. I wondered what your thoughts on it was.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I put that question as well to Gagan Mohindra, who was the one MP who asked the question, and he gave me the very firm impression that she thought it would be a good idea for him to ask the question. He's the Deputy Chief Whip, I think he said, of the Tory party. So I asked him if he was disappointed in whether or not she should have tried harder to skewer Keir Starmer, but he wouldn't be drawn on that because he gave me the impression that they'd basically cooked up the plan that he would ask the question and that she would try and sort of come in afterwards with something else. But you're right. I think she could have done a lot better. I think a lot of people would say she could be doing a lot better on a lot of things. But there we are. Let's talk to Hugh Andre, ex-British Army captain, of course, a man who is a very good friend of the show, has been in and out of this show for probably several years, more years than I care to remember, with the Veterans Voice, of course. He works with all manner of different organisations, but including the new one, weserved.com, which if you haven't checked it out yet, you need to check it out. Hugh, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Very well indeed, very well. Long time no see. Good to talk, but let's not pretend this is a pleasant subject to talk about, because I keep saying about this new Labour government, they keep finding new ways to tax people. Surely they're going to run out of ways to tax people, but it turns out you've just discovered yet another way.
Yeah, this is, honestly, Mike, as you know, since I've been supporting veterans, which is 15 years now, this really is an all-time low. This government is just doing a wonderful job at corroding whatever trust they had with the military and the veterans community. But they've pushed the boat out now. What they have, Rachel Reeves has announced, is that from April, the government will be taxing at the rate of 40% the death in service payouts that families receive should their loved one die in service. Now, I will just qualify that.
Yeah.
You won't be applying that tax if you're married, which sort of perplexes me in this world of woke, where we're trying to apply, what's right in society is right for the military, wrong, because in society you don't get asked to charge the enemy.
Right.
To then say, so if I was in service now and was unfortunately killed, or I died of cancer or whatever, my partner of 11 years and my children would be taxed at 40%.
That's outrageous, isn't it?
Now, that really is outrageous. And I was talking with someone yesterday about the difference between us and the US. And this affects me personally, because of both the two people I'm going to talk about, one was a soldier of mine and one was a friend of mine. The soldier was killed on exercise by accident in Canada in 1990. His family got a payout from the government of £700,000. My good friend, who was a rugby player, and he was on a rugby tour with the Duke of Wellington's regiment, he was killed whilst on a military tour in America. Because he was killed in America, the American government picked up the payment and they gave his family 7 million.
Wow.
700 versus 7 million. And that really, I think, just yet again shows, the difference in our country when it comes to the government versus the US, who are really the sort of leading light looking after their veterans and their families.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. So, I mean, this 40% tax which they would impose has previously not been there. It's not being raised from 20%. It's just a flat rate, smack on 40%.
Correct. And the average payout for a military person who unfortunately dies in service is only sort of 4 times their basic salary.
Right.
And anyone can Google what the basic salaries are, typically between 20 to 50, 60,000.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a whole lot of money.
Certainly not enough for a lifetime, is it?
For a lifetime, leaving behind your partner and children. So I think it's absolutely disgusting. And I hope that they can be persuaded to change their mind on that one.
Right.
Because there are 5.1 million veterans and family members across the United Kingdom. That's a lot of votes.
Right. And we know that Johnny Mercer was the Veterans Minister when he was in the Tory government. He's no longer an MP. What have they got in terms of representation in this Labour government for veterans?
Well, they've put it back into the Ministry of Defence. They had the Office for Veterans Affairs, which Johnny, beat his drum about for a long time. This country had its Office for Veterans Affairs established in 2019. In America and Canada, they established theirs after the Vietnam War.
Right.
Yet again, just goes to show you how our, brave servicemen and women and veterans are treated by not just this government, but plenty of previous governments as well. And that's why I keep saying, Mike, as you know, that veterans need to look after veterans,
Absolutely.
not politicians.
No, absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of conversations going on right now around the subject of not just veterans, but the Department of Defence, whether or not, defence as part of the GDP of this country should be improved. Starmer was only just recently over in Brussels talking to NATO about strengthening their resolve with the European partners and all of that. But there's never any conversations really about paying veterans or paying members of the military more money, is there?
No, they're always the last ones. They're always the first to be asked to step in to secure the Olympics or the borders or distribute, a vaccination program. And yet, they're not the ones who get the pay rises, because I think governments know that, British soldiers, sailors, airmen and women are the best in the world, and they just get on with it. And maybe they should grumble, maybe they should moan a bit more, but they can't. But the likes of you and I, that's what we're here. We're here to shout and to be their voice and to try and affect change on their behalf.
Yeah, totally. And we'll do exactly that. If we can do anything we can do, we will do. Hugh, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Hugh Andre, the ex-British Army captain, founder of We Served, which is a great organisation. Go and check it out, weserved.com. It's a great place for veterans. If you are one, it's a great place to help veterans if you're not one. So that would be my suggestion to you. Let's get a voice note from Alan on bin collections.
Morning, Mike. Great show, by the way. I live in a rural area and we have a bin collection every 2 weeks for black bags.
Yeah.
Recently it got missed, so I did the responsible thing and went down to the dump, and there was 2 guys stood there like security guards in the place where you throw the black bin bags, and I kid you not, he made me open every single black bag and show him what was inside, and he had me running all over the place trying to recycle this and take lids off that, and the country's just become a joke. I still don't understand why we have to pay council tax.
Yeah. It is absolutely mad. If they've started to do that, they're actually starting to open up your bin to see what's in it. I mean, are we living in North Korea now? What the hell is going on? James is in Cardiff, wants to talk about Chagos Islands. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Mike, I'll be quick because I know you've got to go.
Yeah.
Mike, the Labour Party, what they're doing is absolutely disgraceful for the Chagos Islands. Now, the Chagos Islands are one of our 14 Crown dependencies. In 2013, those dependencies voted, and it was 93.25% wanted to remain under the British Crown.
Yes.
Now, Labour have always said if anything changed the constitutional structure of Great Britain, they would then have a referendum. The people of Great Britain have a right to go and decide whether one of our 14 Crown dependencies get handed across to Mauritius, who have no right to it. And this government is a national security risk, and I demand a referendum if whether we are giving away British territory and then having the cheek to go and pay for it to lease it back.
Oh, I know. Makes no sense at all, does it? I mean, it's the most ridiculous deal I think anybody's ever heard of. If you were doing that deal in any other arena, you'd have the men in the white coats coming to take you away. They'd go, what are you doing? You know, how stupid are you?
Mike, this is tantamount to treason against the British people and to our overseas territories. What are the other 13 going to think? Are the Falklands and Gibraltar going to be handed back because those two melons feel guilty?
I know. I mean, if it's that of David Lammy, I'm afraid I wouldn't trust him with, as far as I could throw him, which wouldn't be very far. At all, actually. But listen, Ian, James, thank you very much indeed. I got this from Kev in Spain. He said, there's a hen night down at my local pub tonight. I'm going there hoping to get a bit of voice coaching. I see what you did there, Kev. Good luck with that. Don't forget to invite Rachel Reeves along, so if anything goes wrong, you can just call it a work event. Ian, on the voice note, have a listen.
Morning, Mike. Ian Hemel Hempstead. This statute of limitations, is it statue or statute? Because I think it's referring to Starmer. He's like a statue. He's made of stone. It's 3 years, which is probably the maximum he's going to have in power, if he's lucky. And if there's anyone with limitations within that parliament, it's Keir himself.
Very true. Statue of limitation. I think that's a good way to describe him. Absolutely right. Here's one from Steve, who says, in Farnham, they are removing public bins to prevent people leaving domestic waste by them. They have closed a nearby recycling yard and put restrictions on what you can take to the remaining ones. Surprisingly, lanes around the town are full of fly-tipped rubbish. Amazing that, isn't it? Well, I've just had a message as well from Alicia, who says that in her area, basically they're taking appointments for people to go down to the rubbish dump. So if you wanted to, what you used to be able to do was just take your stuff out of the car, dump it in this big bin. Now you're going to have to make an appointment. It'd be like trying to get to see a GP. Can you imagine? What an absolute shower. An absolute and utter nonsense. Lots of you still trying to get your messages through. We'll try and read one more before we go. Mark says this, now I know there is a 3-year limit on COVID rules I can now admit to. Can I admit to joining Bromley Supporters Club and Kings Lynn Supporters Club just so that I could watch my beloved Notts County play while away fans were banned from travelling to football matches? Yes, you can indeed, because there's no chance of you ever being prosecuted because of the statute of limitations. Absolutely. Julie Hartley-Brewis here, very good morning.
Very good morning.
Nice to see you.
So, sunny day.
Any
Everything's
confessions
going well
to
in the
make
world?
about, things that were covered?
Absolutely not.
No.
I always obey all laws at